at 7 o'clock, and in the event of an emergency, the building may be evacuated. You will be required to vacate the building by the rear entrance and gather at the breezeway between the library and the art gallery buildings, Council's designated emergency muster point. Under no circumstances is anyone permitted to re-enter the building until the all clear has been given and the area deemed safe by authorised personnel. In the event of an evacuation, a member of council staff will assist any member of the public with a disability to vacate the building. Item 1.1 is apologies for absence, and we've got apologies from Councillor Hamling, Councillor Romano.
Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duffy, second. Councillor Nugent. All in favour?
Yep.
Thank you. 1.2, this extraordinary Planning and Development Policy Committee meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to be live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if and when you speak at this council meeting, that you ensure that you're respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Orange City Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures during the course of the council meeting. A recording will be made for administrative purposes and will be available to councillors. I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Wiradjuri nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians who are present. 1.4 is declarations of interest. Does any councillor wish to declare any conflicts of interest in any matter for consideration at the Planning and Development Policy Committee meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one matter which is in closed business. I have a relative who appears in one of those, who's an employee of one of those matters. So it's a less than significant interest in that.
In closed?
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Miller.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in item 2.5, the Byng Street Hotel development. As a council representative, Orange Regional Conservatorium, which is next door to the development.
With Council's permission, with item 2.5, I might move that up to being first one that we consider, so I can do it and then Councillor Turner can take over. Is that it?
Do that way. Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Witt and Councillor Munro. All in favour?
Right.
Thank you. We now have open forum, and I just remind everybody we have, I think, 13 or 14 speakers, which is quite a few. And I just asked all speakers to keep their remarks to the topic and not make any defamatory statements, and possibly, because there are quite a few speakers on a number of the items that are it'd be in your best interest if you didn't repeat perhaps what other people have done. So I haven't put them in any special order. We've just tried to bulk them in so they run consistently. So our first speaker is Charles Everett, and his topic for discussion is the Motel 62 Byng Street boundary fence. Mr. Everett.
Thank you very much. My main worry is the boundary fence or fences at the motel. From what I can read, they want to change, or they have changed, the fences from hardwood to pine, treated pine. As a former building inspector, I am against this completely. They do not last in this climate, and I've inspected many of fences. Pine palings cost $1.70. Hardwood palings cost $2.90. Now, that shows you the difference if you allow for transport and everything. hardwood pilings are far superior to the treated pine ones. I've had a look at the treated pine ones used, and my feelings, they are not up to standard. They are twisting, and I feel that treated pine should be done away with. Hardwood is a heritage item. Pine isn't. I asked the adjoining owner if I could have a look at the fence that is constructed there with the pine palings. And to my thoughts, the fence is not up to specification. There are many rules and regulations to building a fence. The fence is just not a fence. It is a structure that suffers more battering than any other part of the building because it's standing alone. It's got to stand terrific wind pressures. And the lap piling fence is just like a brick wall when the wind hits it. I noticed there's a number of items that are wrong in constructing the fence, and it's nowhere near the correct standard. And I believe it is going to be painted, from what I could read, going to be painted on one side. Now, if you paint palings on one side, the other side will absorb moisture, they'll cup, and they'll fall off the fence like no 10 pins. The palings aren't even nailed properly. They're not the wrong standard, and a lot of the rails have been damaged by the nailing too close to the edge, and they're coming away already. If I would get the treated pine palings deleted completely and replaced with the proper palings that match the heritage area and will withstand the orange climate. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hewitt. Our second speaker is Jeff Ryak, and it's about Amendment 21 to the Orange Local Environmental Plan, totally local.
Problems with this development in the past. I won't go into that because it's not worth it. I've been down to the council the last 10 years, nearly every week. About had it. I don't want this development to go through because it's encroaching on my back boundary. Things that I've had to put up with, I should never had to put up with. Taxpayer of rates in this town. I'm very proud of the town, but I'm not proud of what's going on next door to me. And the problems been numerous, like rats, dust, noise, trucks going in and out all night, taking the corner off my block and giving it to the next door neighbours. I know it's an RTA thing, but that should never have happened. I just want to renounce, what this building's are going to come to in the near future. I've had nothing but dramas. Haven't done the proper work on their appraisals already, so waste of time, even me, trying to get around this problem. I feel like I'm getting railroaded.
Thanks, Mr. Wright. Next speaker is Simon Oliver, and it's re the Towag Equine Precinct. Mr. Oliver? Thanks. If you can come down the microphone. And say
I just
everyone
an objection to this development. I submitted an email and I just note it hasn't been included in the papers that were on the website today. I've got a response back from council acknowledging the objection. And I guess the other concern is I know...
You'd like to speak to the email then?
No, I didn't bring it. I left it behind, unfortunately. Part of the objection was, one, the concern that the Orange Racetrack, the Painter Club area, was excluded from the development. Two, that Blaney has already jumped the gun as far as getting funding for a proposed equine centre out there, and I highly doubt that much funding will be sought or found for Orange to do a similar sort of establishment less than 30 kilometres away. So I'm just wondering how this is actually going to go ahead and be funded as per some of the comments in the proposal. Currently, the land that we have can be sold to anyone, horse owners or not. As soon as this proposal goes in, I think it's going to restrict the ability to sell. I think it's only going to restrict it to people with a horse interest, not to general by a semi-block. So, main things I'd like to raise.
Mr. Oliver?
Okay,
Yeah, thank you. Next speaker is Gemma Dwyer, and it's DA 168 Shirley Road.
Thank you. Shirley is earmarked to be the next great suburb of Orange. Councillors, we ask you to listen to us, the people who live here. If things are approached the right way, a manner that is understood, landowners are kept informed, and the process followed correctly, you'll have a lot less people in here arguing their case. Council cannot dictate how we use our land. The Act, the LEP and the DCP all clearly state that consent is required. We are not a third party. We are affected landowners who own the land that you are conditioning consent on. This application affects lots of properties and requires consent from several landowners. Lot 1 to 6 requires consent from 3 properties, being McMahon's, Coulson and Dwyer's. Lot 7 to 17 requires consent from no less than 4 property owners, being Saunders, Sharkey's, McMahon and Dwyer's. Some of these property owners had never even received notification of this development. Just because applications like this have happened elsewhere does not make it legal. The correct process always needs to be followed. We believe that that has not been the case. We've been told by some council members, staff, compulsory acquisition of land required for easements can happen. And yet these very conditions of easements are a condition of the consent, and it says that it's the sole responsibility of the developer to deal with the landowners in this matter. It makes it very confusing as to whether we're dealing with council or a developer. And it appears that council are conditioning their way out of this application and putting us, the landowners, in a hot seat. Some of us have met with the developer's representative with no outcomes or negotiations made. In fact, no negotiations were even tabled by the developer. Just us all being told there's nothing to worry about. If this application is approved, we are immediately put on the back foot. The developer will hold all the cards because he will have a stamped and approved consent that dictates how our land can be developed in the future. Look at condition 40. This absolutely dictates what can and cannot be put on our land. We ask, how can approval be given when so many other landowners' consent is required? If this was council land, I'm sure that the negotiations would have been made prior to a development application being accepted. The whole process does not make sense. If approved, the council get to wipe their hands of the matter and we have to deal with the developer. in a lengthy, presumably costly and timely process in order to defend our right to not develop our land until we are ready. For these reasons, we ask that this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Nair. Charles Everett. Speaking on the boarding house in March Street.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Orange Heritage Group in this matter, partially for myself. We wish to endorse their recommendation to staff to refuse this application. It has torn the hearts out of the neighbours who lived in the area in peace and quiet. We would like to thank the staff for their hard work and research to arrive at this decision. We will leave the effect that the units have on individual adjoining owners to them. This type of development is not wanted in East Orange at this time. I myself have driven through the area for nearly 20 years and now live in East Orange. And in the last 10 years, I've seen the area come alive again. First you notice a nice new fence, and there are many. And then you look behind the fences and you see renovated house. Sometimes not too much. They all add to the vibrancy of the area. And look at the old shops. A butcher's shop turned into a thriving coffee shop. Mackey's old grocery store, now a tea house and florist. A corner store that is an art gallery. The shop opposite East Orange Post Office, the former stronghold of the Labor Party, now selling maternity wear. All reusing the existing old buildings, not wanting to change the face of East Orange. There have been a number of units built in the area, sympathy with the area, even the new UPA building just up the road. You hardly notice it, fully exposed on the corner. These units have been accepted because they do not try and force their standard on the area, not like the present DA that is trying to impose its standard on the area. The original two-storey buildings and the workers' cottage set the standard for East Orange, and under the control of their own council, we should work to keep that feeling today. The developer has torn the streetscape to pieces with his black hole entry to the rear of the block, completely breaking the ambience of the lovely old building at 194, taking away the lovely garden alongside the house and jamming a metal fence nearly on the side wall of the building. To get more units in the area, he has, without thought to the occupants, built rooms into the attics of the roofs. This reminds me of my grandparents living in conditions like this in England in 1900, not for today's population in Australia. The applicant keeps referring to further occupants of the units as a higher social economic group that does not fit the standard that this type of accommodation was legislated for. Not enough thought has been given to the effect that this development would have on Newman Park, both with noise, level and visually. The park is a living monument to all those who have served our district and country. We have the special trees, the monument to East Orange students, and the National Servicemen's Monument. Even the children's playground has a significant place in the actions of the servicemen remembered in this park, has allowed these children to play in peace as our ancestors. We therefore ask to endorse the recommendation of the Council and reject this application completely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Everett. Our next speaker is Sylvia Cleary, in relation to 194A March Street.
Hello, everybody. I was hoping I wasn't going to be the first speaker tonight. We've got very good technical people backing me up. I'm just the emotional one. But I am very emotional about these units in East Orange. I've sold my property at Clifton Grove. I've moved into East Orange and I'm loving it. Suddenly I'm going to have all these buildings going up behind me. So I've presented something here. Our neighbourhood is mostly single-storey homes with large gardens and trees. Heritage homes dominate the area. Is it any wonder that a development of 3 by 2-storey boarding houses would be found objectionable by all of us? We relish the peace and quiet of the village atmosphere. The council website in 2016 stated 40,334 residents in Orange live in 17,452 dwellings. That's an average household of 2.45 people. These 3 boarding houses will home up to 36. Well, there goes the Orange average, doesn't it? ASAP 2009 says the design of the development is to be compatible with the character of the local area. It's certainly not. ASAP 2009 Part 4 says no subdivision of boarding houses. Development is not legal. This is probably the reason that the professional Orange council people that do all the hard work in the background will not approve the development. This is a battle axe block surrounded on 4 sides by single-storey dwellings, except for one driveway. Private courtyards and backyards with a happy sound of families and children will be overlooked by tenants in the boarding houses, up in the sky. What type of people will live there? Certainly not, as the developer states, medical staff and professionals. It will be short-stay people with no interest in being neighbourly or part of our community. Would they have the same respect and dignity that we show our neighbours? In a letter objection to council, Ella Butcherine, a 3rd-year doctor, page 40 on your agenda tonight, she states that the proposed accommodation would not be attractive to young professionals who would have most partners or families. These descriptions used by the developer is just to grab your attention. The hospital already provides accommodation for those students on short-term stay. Our neighbourhood is a very quiet part of town with typical backgrounds of noise levels at night, about 28 dBA, not sure what that means, which is similar to the sound of rustling leaves. I am only 9 metres away from the 1st storey or the ground floor in Building C. It will block my view, take away my privacy in all inside living areas, which is mostly glass. Entertaining privacy in my backyard will be destroyed. I've even thought I could throw a sausage to the boarding house if I had to, if they wanted it. Let me say here that because of the slope of the land, Nile Street villas and units to the south are around 1 metre lower than the ground floor boarding house in Building C. So ground floor residents in the development will also be able to overlook the private courtyards and living rooms of these homes, let alone those living in the 2nd storey. Buildings A and B will overlook the backyards of March and Autumn or March and Autumn streets. All residents in our block should have been consulted, but we were not. God, I got such a shock when I heard about it. Therefore, the 2-storey development is not compatible with the surrounding area. All backyards which surround the complex, that is Autumn, March and Nile, will lose their privacy and have to put up with the noise. Talk about, you've all been in a supermarket car park. Well, I'm going to have one at my back fence. I will have 7 right on my back fence, just a colour-bond fence, and there'll be another 5 further over. When I say supermarket car parks, you know what I mean. Bang, 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 bang. So I've got headlights at night, security lights continually going on and off, CCTV cameras, start-up of engines, revving, and if shift workers take residency there, it'll be at any time of the night. Intrusive nighttime levels, noise levels must not exceed 35 dBA at the boundary. There's that word again. What about conversations on the colour-bond fence? I'll be able to hear everything those people are saying. So on this block of land, there will be 24 car parks, 6 motorbike parking areas and 24 air conditioning units. Don't forget, I'm talking about a battle axe block with beautiful family homes, all around it. It should not be allowed. No visitor parking, and already the streets are very busy, especially at delivery and pick-up times of children in the primary school. The letter of objection by East Orange Primary School Principal Mr Glenn Burke is well worth reading. And in the agenda tonight, it's on page 132. He brings forward all the heritage sides of East Orange. The developer realises so many people in a small area can cause unhealthy attitudes because they're all put into these little rooms together. So, on the developer's own DA, I found this wonderful information. If I've got time, 2.7 to 2.11 on attachment 2 talks about the dramas that might happen. There'll be a manager there. He's allowed to evict people. He wants all our phone numbers and we're going to have his because they're expecting a problem. And already you councils know that the police. Why do we want this in our neighbourhood? Already the police have assessed potential crime in this area to be high. And look, I'm just a little old lady who wants to have a good time, and I'm going to have to put up with maybe people jumping fences, hopping on the bonnets of the cars and coming into my backyard. So please think seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Cleary. Much. Our next speaker, excuse me, is Dr Ruth Arnold, and it's in relation to 194A March Street.
Yeah, thank you, councillors. Mine will be a slightly different sort of speech, but I just wanted to speak about this development application and just how it fits. How does the state legislation impact on how we as a community deal with state priorities versus local priorities, and how do we process the needs of the community and those considerations now and into the future. So there's a couple issues I briefly wanted to stick to time and touch on, which was the primary aims of the state SEP and what it's trying to achieve, versus number 2, the concept of use for pitch at higher rental markets, which has been seen in Southern Sydney areas where this legislation and planning vehicle has been used. Thirdly, touch on the strata subdivision issue. 4th, mention green space. 5, look at just a couple issues about whether it's fit for the needy who might, if it were focused on providing low cost accommodation, whether their needs would be met. Mention briefly the issue about the medicos and finally the heritage issues. So running through those very quickly. Number 1, as I think people are aware, this application is under a state SEP, which is mainly focused at the provision. The primary objective of this as a community is to provide increased amount of affordable housing. And that is specifically defined in the SEP as being pitched at low to moderate income families to enhance affordable housing. I don't think that this application in its current form is focused on truly providing increased affordable housing, because it mentions all over the development application that it's pitched at medical staff and professionals, and that's certainly been covered in the local media. And look, I think most people would grant you that medical professionals don't fit low income needy people that this SEP is primarily aimed at. And the concept of use of pitching this at a higher rental market, to my mind, it's like, is that what the SEP's trying to achieve? And is that really stepping around the usual planning vehicles that would be, for instance, looking at density and whether a more boarding house aimed at professionals fits in competition with other businesses in the area, for example. So it's use of a different vehicle and different checking steps for what that other purpose of the more commercially focused accommodation would be judged by under normal circumstances. Nextly, the strata issue has raised some questions for me. It seems that subdivision is not normally recommended under this SEP. And if this was strata titled into 3 separate entities, my question to council is, would it then still meet the overall requirements, for instance, of an on-site manager's room that is overseeing the whole site? If under strata title you have 3 completely different entities running the show, are you going to have additional fencing that would then impact on shadow diagrams, on emergency vehicle access, and on the site overall, so that it may risk not complying? Next, green space. The SEP does cover green space, and I could see that usually there is 35 square metres per dwelling and at least 30% green space mentioned in the overall SEP description that I could find, and deep soil depth on sites of these applications were meant to be 15% with minimum dimensions of 3 metres. And being someone who loves gardens and trees, I wasn't able to sort of see all of those issues being catered for. In terms of the medical professionals as a marketing ploy or focus for this accommodation, to me that seems something that's been used to try and promote the likelihood that it might be approved, but it does seem to be irrelevant to the planning considerations of the site. And in specifically addressing that, I just wanted to mention that medicos in the area come on a variety of different contracts. This accommodation under the SEP is for 3-month stays or more. Not many doctors who come to the area fit that bill. You've got junior doctors are on usually 12-week rotations or 10 weeks. They have a certain accommodation standard under their
Dr. Arnold,
award, which is not.
There, I'll have to get an extension. Councillor Mataletto, Councillor Whitten, all in favour? Thank you.
I'll try and wrap up very quickly, sorry. Next, heritage. Orange has heritage areas which are a major asset for this town. They're one of the biggest draw cards of people moving and relocating into the area, downsizes, people relocating from Sydney. There's something that really does need to be considered by council as an asset, and East Orange has shown major improvements over the area that have in recent years that have made it very attractive and very popular. So in summary, I think the DA in its current form, I don't think it focuses on the needs of affordable housing for the needy. I don't personally feel it's compatible with the local heritage area in which it's been applied for in terms of its density and green space considerations. If developments are approved under this SEP, it does seem to me that they require a conditioning on title that they be actually used for affordable housing for a period of 10 years by licensed providers, and that 50% of the occupants have to meet that low income test. So there are definitions about that, and I just don't think medicos as purported in the media would fit the bill. So I
Dr. Arnold,
council for its due consideration and making the right decision for the long-term interests of Orange. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Arnold. Our next speaker is Ruth Thomason, and it's in relation to 194A March Street.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors. My name's Ruth Thomason and I'm here to represent neighbours, incidentally ratepayers, of this proposed DA in East Orange. Not sure that I can add much to what Charles and Ruth have said, but I'll give it a go. So firstly, I'd like to thank the councillors for their time in getting us to this point in the process. Very complex matter, and it's taken a considerable amount of effort. I'd also like to add that I'm extremely impressed with the diligence of the council staff in producing such a considered report, and I'd also like to thank them for that. I've given a handout, which I won't have time to go through today because I'll stick to the things. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. So I'll just talk about some of the main points. So Orange is growing. Fabulous. I think we can all agree that we're happy about that. However, what I'm not so happy about is the fact that this DA is not going to contribute to that growth in a positive way. Firstly, the New South Wales Police Overall Crime Risk Assessment has rated this as having a high risk of increasing crime. In itself makes it incompatible with the character of the local neighbourhood. Secondly, as Charles has talked to, and hard to beat it, it fails on any criteria of heritage, streetscape and visual appearance. It's worth noting that the heritage context of this DA is highly valued not only by the neighbours, the East Orange community, the Orange community and visitors to Orange, but people also planning to move to Orange. And as Ruth's alluded to, we need to attract new people to come, new people with skills, new professionals, new retail people and new tradespeople. It also fails any criteria of the Affordable Renting Housing State Environmental Planning Policy 2000 aims. Ruth talked a bit about this at length, but critically, the aim of that SEP, which has been reiterated by the Department of Planning and Environment, is to provide housing for the homeless and the disadvantaged. So it fails on that criteria. Fails on the criteria of the character of the local area. This character is almost predominantly single-storey homes of varying types, but with large gardens and leafy streetscapes. It fails the criteria for solar access requirements into communal boarding houses in midwinter for 3 hours of direct sunlight. And although I'm not going to show you now, in that handout we have taken photos of the site from the neighbour's side on the hour, every hour on the 1st of July to demonstrate that in fact there is no way that those communal living spaces would get 3 hours of daylight. And incredibly, although the Affordable Renting Housing SEP expressly precludes subdivision of boarding houses, it's an application to subdivide the boarding houses, so again another failure. There are also numerous negative impacts on the neighbours. I'm going to mention a few, other people will talk about them at length. These are intrusive noise, overlooking from the slope of the land, particularly affecting those neighbours on the lower side in Nile Street, overlooking of all the neighbours from the 2-storey construction, overshadowing of the neighbours' yards, lights bill from the security lighting, and significant increase in traffic, which is going to be particularly problematic during school pickups and drop-offs. However, we also have to consider the amenity of the people who will be actually living in these boarding houses. This is very low, and I don't think it matters what the level of income is, whether it's high or low, but if you live in a small room where the bottom of your window is 1700 or about here and you can't actually see out, I think that's going to make it incredibly hard for you to maintain a cheery kind of outlook on life, and I just don't think we need to create those sort of problems. The crime and safety. As mentioned, New South Wales Police have given this an overall crime risk rating of high. That's pretty scary. So consequently, they've got recommendations to control the access using lock gates during darkness, security lighting for driveways and parking, a CCT for crime monitoring, and to have an adequate guardian for the site. This alone makes it not compatible with a quiet residential area with a primary school half a block away, Newman Park across the road with its war memorials, and a retirement home very close by. So in closing, I would just like to say that in light of these serious issues, it's very difficult to see how a reasonable person could allow the development to proceed, as it would effectively disregard its non-compliance with the affordable renting housing state environmental planning policy, as well as council's own DCP and LEP, including for infill housing. And therefore, I ask, and also on the behalf of the neighbours who aren't speaking tonight, that the councillors refuse the development as has been recommended by their subject matter experts. Thank you for your time.
Is Lisa Cuniel, and it's redevelopment application 194A March Street.
I made an objection letter, and I'd just like to go through some of the points that haven't been made so far. I lived in 58 Autumn Street, which does back onto the development because it was a tennis court that was attached to the block I lived in and now manage that actually makes up part of this development. This tennis court was made up of bits of land that people in the area had put together. A tennis court was made onto it as a communal resource. And when I was living there, we didn't tend to use it, but it was a beautiful area to walk through with my children and meet the local, the people who lived in 194, who's Stan and Betty. And they used to come down over the vegetable patch and have a chat and watch my children grow up. And Stan was born in that house and lived there all his life. And there were many magical moments. So as I couldn't justify having all that space in a city area, I did decide to sell that block to allow more people to live in the area where I could walk to town and have the amenities of the park and the school. So it was a social conscious partly that I thought, great, this area then can be opened up to more families. However, that did not include the idea of a 36-bedroom boarding house. If my children were living there now, or if this was made, they'd have a number of people looking over, and I would not be comfortable allowing my children to play in the backyard. I wouldn't be able to consider having vegetables there because they would be overshadowing. Wouldn't allow them to play in the cubby house. And that would be that whole reason of all those blocks which have had families. When I was there were families on either side, there were families all around, and there will be families again. And this boarding house will severely impinge on that character. It'll also, there's a requirement of a 1.8 metre fence, and that will shadow that yard all day in winter. So that's a personal testimony to why it'll be of a concern. And then there's a community concern. I researched a particular evaluation of a report of the Boarding Houses Act. And the statistics that have come out in this report, which was done in 2014, are quite concerning. It found that 82% of the participants in boarding houses were male, only 18% were female. A large number were on New Start payments, a large number were on disability support, and they were older. So the general population were people with high needs, often with social and mental health issues. Majority were not working, and there were only a few students and 10% families. Now, I'm not unsympathetic to people who have needs in terms of, say, mental health issues or social issues. I myself am a psychologist. I work with people all the time to improve their mental health, to improve their social capacity. I don't believe this boarding house will allow that to happen. It will be a magnet for people on low incomes, which is what the affordability planning strategy is about. But this particular one won't add to their wellbeing either. And so 85% of the residents in boarding houses in New South Wales at the time of 2014 were males, mostly over 45 and on pensions. Now, this is a crucial point because this is right in the middle of a family area, next to a family park, down the road from a school, which is very family-based. And I myself would not be happy with children walking to school knowing they'd have to go through a community area, like past an area where there's a large amount of older males who are unemployed living, with all the other associated mental health issues. And the report goes through it in quite detail about some of the mental health, social and substance abuse issues that go with people attracted to boarding houses or who go there because there's no options. People with options won't be using this boarding house. So that's my concerns, and thank you for your time. And I'm really glad that the report has shown that there's major concerns on all fronts with this particular development. And I ask councillors to be sensitive to that and reject the development.
Is Ian Ergard, and it's the Australian Housing Initiative.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you all. I am from the Australian Housing Initiative. I am a property developer. I am a specialist in boarding houses across the country, and I do own them and I do run them, and I have lived next door to them with 4 daughters. The reason I want to address this application is that I approached the Tasmanian government 2 years ago with very similar parallels to what I'm seeing in Orange right now. Hobart is now the second most unaffordable city in the world. So when we talk about that, firstly, I want to talk about the definition of affordability under the Affordable Housing SEP. The federal government defines affordability as spending no more than 30% of your gross wage towards rental accommodation. Above that, you're under housing stress. So when it comes to looking at different areas, affordability has a different price point. So the difference between affordability in Bowen and the difference between the top end of Byng Street is very different when it comes to affordability. I want to talk to you about some stats. The stats say that Orange, in 2014, the state member realised there's no diversification, that there's no limitless pool of money available to build public housing, and in which case realised that the private industry is a place that needs to take up to that. Currently, right now, for a 1 or 2 bedroom house on the waiting list for housing, there's a 10-year waiting list in Orange. The 2017 Anglicare report stated that the single income households available to rent is declining in Orange. Data shows that Orange is the most desirable regional city in New South Wales that attracts people to come to it. Digital Finance Australia has Orange appearing at number 6 as the most increased housing stress under mortgages in the country. The difference between 2011 and 2016 census shows that there was an increase of 695 new households in Orange that were single and double households. That made up 81% of new households that appeared in Orange in the 5-year period. In the same period, you lost in Orange 52 2-bedroom homes or 1-bedroom homes and increased stock of 4 and 5-bedroom homes. Of all new housing, 86% of stock was 4 and 5-bedroom homes. You have an affordability issue coming. The perception of what's going on with this application is that it is seriously a perception. The word boarding house automatically brings stigma to the fact that low socio, drug dealers, criminals and bikies are moving into the area, and that's not the case. I know, I own them and I run them, and we have a very varied amount of people in there. I've represented the industry at other meetings, noticeably in Northern Beaches, 800 complaints against one boarding house, pre-approval, post-approval, one complaint about the fact that it was being used for short stay, which is illegal under the New Generation Boarding House policy. Fair Trading in the last 5 years has had 1,162 phone calls to the boarding house hotline. Of those phone calls, only 31 of them were complaints. The article mentioned earlier in 2014 was based on all boarding houses in New South Wales in the Sydney area that were share facility boarding houses, traditional, not new gen boarding house. The major demographic that moves into our boarding houses are the biggest growing demographic of homelessness in the country right now, which is the 55 plus single female. The planning report, although good, has some issues around a report by Mr Scobie on the heritage. I'll allow that for the professionals to talk about. The report does state that the developer didn't actually do any changes and he had a 20% reduction from its original plan to its current plan. Standing on the site, you can see two-storey buildings, one the cafe and another one further along that you can view from the street. It is a multiple dwelling site to address the subdivision rule in the Affordable Housing SEP. Subdivision of individual rooms within one boarding house is not allowable. It's a multiple dwelling site, so multiple boarding houses can be approved. Land environment, has plenty of places around the character. Character is such a subjective matter that it becomes a very interesting outcall. Why am I here? The developer didn't pay me.
Look, I'd just remind anyone there, give everyone the opportunity to have their say and show some respect. Thank you.
I woke up in 2013 as a standard everyday developer with a large amount of money in my bank account and one of the unhappiest days of my life, suicidal, and had planned to take action on that. My focus from that point forward was to address the community in a possible way that would actually meet the needs. And 80% of people looking for rental accommodation are singles and couples, and 80% of our housing stock in Australia now is 3, 4 and 5 bedroom houses. I want the ability for people to be able to rent accommodation at a third to a half off the nearest rent so that they can save some money so that they can also get into their own houses within 3 to 5 years. I'm passionate about making sure that people can get into affordable housing, and I ask you to base this on its merits of planning rather than emotion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Ugart. Next speaker is Trevor Buckman. It's in relation to DA 86/2018-1. Just come over here. The people up the back won't be able to hear. Thanks.
I live at 62 Autumn Street, and two of the buildings will face directly onto my place from their western side. My major objection is the fact that it's two-storey. Whatever people say about it's not going to overview into my backyard, it's absolutely false. And that's one of the things which, reading the report yesterday, about the thing that the council had put together, and thank you, council, for doing that, but it is not going to improve the area at all. Heritage-wise, I don't know whose heritage it follows, but it certainly doesn't follow the heritage of my place, which is a 1905 Federation building. And I just feel that, anyway, the whole thing is unreasonable and the DA should be quelled.
Our next speaker is Mr Ron Gander. That's in relation to the 194A March Street.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to just give a little bit of history why I'm involved. I first started school at the East Orange School in 1948 as a 5-year-old. I've lived in East Orange all of my life. We're in Dalton Street, and I bought a block in Spring Street. I built my home, moved in August 1970, and I'm still there. I'm very, very concerned about the security of the residents in my area, because if you look and if you drive down Autumn Street, you'll find a large community for aged care units. Exactly the same on the western side of Nile Street. The UPA built units there, as they did on the eastern side. Then there's Ascot Gardens, and then there's the development and the aged people that this is neighbours to. Now, people won't be able to go out into their backyards. They won't be able to have a barbecue without being viewed by the people in these 2-storey boarding houses. I'm very, very interested in the fact that the police see them as a danger to the community. And in many other towns, this type of accommodation has been used for a community rehabilitation for people who have been released from jail or from psychiatric hospitals. I also view the fact that the park, there's many, many children going to and from. If the wrong person was to move into these units, what a little fishing area for a pedophile or whatever. I'm very concerned about the security of this area. This will absolutely destroy the peace and the quiet, I believe, of East Orange. The consideration of trying to get a garbage truck in and out of there. Or does everybody have to bring 35, 50, 60, 70 garbage bins down to the footpath and make a mess of it? The ancillary services that are required for this, and the fact that if there's a bunch of young people go in, parties, the noise, the disturbance to the neighbours. Now, most of the folk that are in these aged care facility units have lost their partners. They're in these units as a community, but also as a single person, for security, for fellowship, for friendship, and to see their final days out in peace, quiet and harmony. This definitely won't happen if you've got 3 little barns full of rat bags. And quite candidly, I mean, you go, have a look at the 3-storey building in Dalton Street. It really needs a police station on the lower ground. The number of times the paddy wagons are there, the cars that are destroyed in there, no wheels on the vehicles. We do not want to set up ghettos. And quite candidly, I believe this construction could make Soho or the Redfern of East Orange. Why are they being built in Orange? Have they seen this company as a Queensland company? Have they been run out of Queensland? Why not stick in your own state? Queensland's got many, many large cities. And quite candidly, I just think this does not suit. Now, with these interesting documents, I took the initiative today, and I've spoken to a minister in the state government, and he's asked me to forward this, and he will take it to the planning minister. So I'm going to have this looked at, because Mayor demands review of affordable housing is one headline from the Sydney Morning House. $500 to rent a boarding house room as developers exploit planning laws. And then the third document has got some rather heavy issues on planning. Sorry. And quite candidly, and I'll leave this to the state government to sort out, but Mr. Mayor, anything that's good for the city I'm for. But I think this is going to be a wart on the end of our nose. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Ann Sladdick, and it's 194A March Street.
Thank you. My name, as Bridge just said, is Mary Ann Sladdick, and I'm a resident and ratepayer in Orange and have been a resident all my life. I'm also an adjoining neighbour on 2 sides. Firstly, I'd like to thank Council too. They've done an amazing job, and a lot of time and effort has been put into it. So, our concerns as residents with this proposed development is with regard to the noise level. The background noise of our neighbourhood was measured at approximately 28 decibels. Bearing in mind also from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. on Monday to Saturday and 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Sundays and public holidays, nighttime noise levels mustn't exceed 35 dBA, the boundary. That's averaged over 15 minutes. The proposed development has 24 cars, 6 motorbikes and 24 air conditioners running intermittently, not concurrently, as stated in the Blackett Acoustic Report. This is in a quiet residential area. According to the Blackett Acoustic Report, 7 residences are identified as locations where the LA max level will exceed or be equal to 52 decibels at night. According to legislation, a detailed assessment needs to be provided for individual locations. Also required is a reasonable or feasible additional mitigation measures that could reduce the noise level. Please see the summary that was discussed with acoustic, which the councillors have. Also note table 4.4 the data, project noise trigger levels appears to not to take into account the different noise limitations for weekdays versus weekends and public holidays. This was not provided, so perhaps an independent review needs to be done on the acoustic report. The capacity on site is for 24 vehicles. Max allowable noise for a car is 90 to 96 decibels, and that's according to Managing Vehicle Noise, April 2013, page 7, Environmental Planning Authority. Most parking is right on the boundaries, especially of March Street and Niles Street residents, which is the Niles Street is unit south of the proposed development border boundary. The noise and the movement of 24 vehicles, 24/7, would have a huge impact on what is now a very quiet residential environment. As I said, 28 decibels is what a quiet whisper would be at night. This type of accommodation will most likely generate shift workers as residents. Such occupants often have diesel vehicles that require longer starting and idling time, especially during winter. Much longer idling time will be required in winter for frosted windows to clear. Not a matter of starting a vehicle and driving off. These cars are not under cover, and some are under 24-hour shaded areas, so hence frost windows. There's capacity for 6 motorbikes. The maximum noise allowable is 94 to 100 dBA. Again, that's part of the Environmental Planning Authority. 6 motorbike parking spaces are situated right on the boundary of my residence in March Street. Bearing in mind a jackhammer max is 90. When you're hearing a jackhammer, that's 90 decibels. And also a lawnmower. Potentially, there could be 6 motorbikes at one time. A motorbike was being ridden in Newman Park on the northern extreme last Sunday, quite illegally. The level of noise from the motorbike was unbearable to the point of I had to move away from my front window in March Street. There will be 24 air conditioning units, plus I assume another 3 for the communal living rooms, which doesn't appear to be represented on the plans. These have a maximum noise level of 66 decibels running 24/7, so they'll be both heating and cooling. In addition, extra demand for heating will occur during winter due to the limited amount of direct sunlight entering the rooms. Building A, which is the northernmost building, 4 air conditioning units are situated right on my boundary, which is approximately 3.3 metres away from my fence to the wall, with 2 more in close proximity just metres away, which also will affect me. According to the relevant legislation, air conditioners should not run more than 5 decibels above the background noise. Boarders will be likely to run air conditioners 24/7. The noise generated from these units will have a negative impact on myself and all the surrounding residents. This will also generate a high electricity load. Does that mean a substation in the heritage streetscape area is required, considering that there are 24 air conditioning units running, plus 24 individual rooms with appliances, dishwashers, toasters, hot water, washing machines, dryers, as there is limited space for outside drying because the outside drying areas are in shadow. Multiply this by 24. It's unlikely that a COLORBOND fence is going to cut down noise level with regard to 24 vehicles, 6 motorbikes and 24 air conditioners to any meaningful level that would make it suitable for a residential area.
Ms Sladdick would just have to
Thank you. Add in the general living noise, music.
To get an extension.
Mr Chairman, yep.
Yes, Councillor Duffy, all in favour? Against? Thanks, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, so add in the compounded noise of just general living areas, social gatherings, music playing at 76 decibels, communal living rooms, etc. Again, I say a COLORBOND fence is not to solve the problem. The question there remains which of the 3 managers is responsible in these strata titles. Who do we deal with? And again, that's not compulsory that they're on site. As an adjoining resident, I'm concerned the noise levels in this report are not accurately predicted. We also have the noise of garbage bins, etc., accommodating for 33 residents. In sight of the negative impacts on adjoining neighbours, we ask councillors to support this staff recommendation and refuse this non-compliant and incompatible development application. Thank you.
That concludes the open forum. Sorry, Mr King, I just haven't got it. Mr King, you're on. Apologise, I haven't got that. I've got it here. Is it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, fellow councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I just want to make one point right from the word go. There's been a lot of points made tonight of not in compliant. I've got to say that our professional team from our town planner, who was commissioned by the state government, of one of 4 gentlemen that wrote this policy. So I think he might know what he's doing, contrary to what some of the comments have been in the report and from some people here tonight. Also, with our other professional team, our acoustics report was developed by an organisation in Sydney that are second to none. So I appreciate everybody's comments, but the professionals are the professionals and the people are entitled to their opinions, but the professionals are the ones that are reporting what needs to be reported. Also, I'd like to point out 2 points. The fact is, I keep hearing about this is affecting heritage. I'd like to remind councillors that this is not a heritage or a heritage conservation area. And under planning policy, this is not a consideration as such because it's not in that area. We've been sympathetic to our designs. I also would like to point out that we actually started the consultation process on what we might do on this site back in April of 2017 to where we got to the point in December of 2017 of where we're get to the point of being able to present what we're presented today. So we went through a number of options and this wasn't our first option. Gated community was our first option. We couldn't make it work, which I've documented to a few councillors about the fact is that with the council contributions, it doesn't make it stack up. So any development and any developer or any investor that coming into Orange needs to look at what the cost it does to do business here in this town. I can appreciate the emotion of the residents, but this is not about emotion. This is about facts and facts only. On the basis that the fact that we've gone along the lines of giving a federation-style design to even to the heritage advisor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll just remind you again, give everyone the opportunity and the respect to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The heritage advisor has made comments that it's not in fitting. Well, the comments that I've had back from people that have seen this first off have gone, wow, this looks fantastic and it's blending. We've even taken on a good 70% of the comments along the way from the heritage advisor and the council staff during this consultation process. So I don't know what more we have to do. We also spoke with the technical services department who have been very good. So all the comments and points that have been made tonight have been addressed with the particular departments within council. So there's no question there whether we comply. As I said, we comply 100% to the state government policy. To the point that this is an illegal development, I call that insulting. The fact is that we are professional in what we do. I'm out of Sydney. I'm investing in Orange. I'm spending millions of dollars in investment in Orange. And the fact is I want to continue to do that. And I've actually said that in the past. But I understand that there's concerns about what the socio-economic demographics might be. But that's not a planning issue. And as councillors and council staff, they know that. That's not an issue. It can't come into play at all because that's becoming along the lines of discriminatory and you cannot do that. I appreciate the point is what Dr. Ruth was talking about in the reference to medical staff. Well, I would like to say this, that we've got doctors with wives and daughters living in granny flats in Sydney. So I would like to say that I appreciate the points, but we're looking at the professional staff, the single occupants, right, that are coming to town. And let me tell you, we've done our research and we've done our research with the hospital. We know that it's needed because there's homes being rented in this city by the room by nursing staff. They're sharing houses. They're paying $220 to $270 a bedroom and sharing rooms. This is a new generation boarding house, gives them a complete facility of their own, fully self-contained. Yes, there's also the market of, unfortunately, the ladies over 50 and 55, widowed, divorced, separated. They need options. And let me tell you, statewide, we're seeing it everywhere. Also, these boarding houses, each under the policy, which we meet 100% to, there's a disabled room in each one of these buildings. So we're providing disabled accommodation. So to the point that everybody's talking about there's going to be druggos and bikies and unemployed people living in these buildings, it astounds me. I thought the people of Orange are people that are warm and welcoming. But when you read through the comments and a lot of these submissions, it questions to beg.
We'll have to get an extension. I move Councillor Duffy, second Councillor Munro. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Even tonight, the Western Institute has got a meeting going on about attracting investment to regional towns. It's happening tonight, or it's actually happened this afternoon, late this afternoon. And that's actually trying to help local councils in attracting investment in their town. On the basis of where we're going now, the fact is that we've got to look at the facts. It's not in a conservation area. The impact is not going to be there. It's in an R1 zone. It's allowable in this zone. Everything we've done meets and complies. The only question is the subject of character, and that's subjective. And that's why I'm asking councillors to look at the facts. This is not about emotion. This is about the facts. And the facts are, if we have to go down another road to another alternative, I know, because we've been there, well, the fact is that we'll come out the other side because we are 100% compliant. I would just like councillors to please understand that we are trying to do a quality development for the total balance in the community in as far as a requirement is concerned, not to what's actually been outlined here tonight. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for those councillors who have spoken to me, and I appreciate the fact is that the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr King. Apologise, that does now close the open forum and the speaker list. Sorry, Mr King, yours was caught up in there. I'll now move over to the Planning and Development Policy Committee meeting that will resume now, and we will go down first of all to number 5, which is Development Application DA329 stroke in brackets 262 Byng Street and 77 Hill Street. Councillor Turner has declared an interest and is leaving the room. Councillors, 2.5 in your hands.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moving the recommendation, Councillor Nugent. Second, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, but I don't really want to speak for the recommendation, but I'm happy to go along with it. But the situation with this situation in Byng Street, I believe I've read the reports and I've had discussions with staff. I wonder if the mover and seconder would like to add and ask council to resolve to formally write to the Building Professionals Board for accredited certifiers to make a complaint about the manner in which the certified had issued instructions.
Well, I personally think that's a matter arising in a separate issue.
I'd like clarification, Mr. Seconder.
I think we could do it
as a matter arising, Mr. Chairman.
I think we could move it as a separate item, actually. Yeah, we can do that because it is basically a separate issue. It covers quite a few things. So everyone's aware of the motion, which is the recommendation on page 97. Councillor Nugent.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I move this. I move the motion, the recommendation, based on the fact that, according to the report, talking about fairly minor modifications to this development, and in many respects, they produce a better environmental outcome and a better outcome for the neighbours than the original DA. So, yeah, based on that, I'm happy to support it. I think there's, potentially some issues in relation to the electricity substation and the location of that, but I understand that that location, the developer has the applicant has looked at other options and consulted with Essential Energy, and that seems to be the only place where it can go. I do want to pick up on Mr. Everett's points about the. I have similar concerns. It's a shame that it's not, hardwood paling fence. Rather, they've substituted a red pine fence. Probably not ideal in the circumstances, but I would like to ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, in relation to the conditions of consent of this modification. What is the current status in terms of that fence and the materials in that fence? Is that now allowable under the conditions of consent? And is it something that is dealt with, in terms of the development application, or is it more an issue between neighbouring properties?
I'll get Mr. Waddell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could draw your attention, councillors, to condition of consent number 66A, which deals with this. My understanding, and Mr. Johnson might be able to help, is that the neighbour to the west has been part of this consultation about the fence, and this is the compromise. Fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. The fence along the western boundary was required to be of a hardwood timber paling initially, and the applicant has now sought, approval to change that to a treated pine fence. There's been a lot of negotiation between both the applicant and also the adjoining neighbour over the style of that fence and its constructability, I guess, or how it's been constructed. And Condition 66A includes what would be done further to the fence to strengthen the fence and to bring it into an acceptable standard of fencing for both parties. From a planning perspective, it would have been ideal to have it as a hardwood fence initially, but the compromise that's come about is also considered to be, an acceptable arrangement on the basis that both parties are now amenable to it. That particular fence has been constructed. We've recommended that council supports it.
Sorry, I should have standing up, but just a follow-up question, well, not a follow-up question, a different question. In relation to the screen, the perforated metal screen that the applicant wanted to replace with a wood lattice screen, does the condition require it to stay as a
yes?
Conditions of consent require it to stay as a perforated metal screen?
Yes, it does.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Maletta.
Yeah, I'm just seeking some clarification from the director. The initial approval was given to a hardwood fence. Stage, the council become aware that we now have a pine fence, treated pine fence.
You can go.
Pretty much once that particular fence had been erected, and a couple of the neighbours had indicated to us that that was now a treated pine fence. We, as said, council's not the certifiers with respect to this development, and I guess we would only get involved in circumstances whereby there was a request or a complaint about whether or not the development has been constructed in accordance with the consent condition. So the applicant's choice there is to, make application to modify the consent, and as alluded to in the report, there is opportunity to consider those matters under a modification. It's entirely up to council now to determine whether or not the changed fence is acceptable or not.
And just for my own benefit, was there an application made by the applicant to change structure of the fence from hardwood to pine?
Not until this particular point here.
So at what stage? So what I'm assuming is we've come here tonight, we've given consent previously to put up a fence, agreed that it should be hardwood with the agreement of the neighbours and other concerned people. Come here tonight to find out that the applicant has decided his own bat, change the structure of the fence, which is in contradiction, I guess, to what was originally proposed.
Correct, Mr. Councillor Maletta. And that, may I add, the private certifier has decided that this is acceptable until raised.
Repeat that, please.
So the Land Environment Court issued a consent which asked for a hardwood fence. Council at that point stepped out of the process. The applicant decided to get a private certifier. Private certifier is the one who has to ensure that the development is built in compliance with the conditions of consent. In this case, he must have satisfied himself that such a change was okay. And I think that's where Councillor Duffy's going. Councillor Duffy has raised the issue that perhaps the Building Professionals Board, who's in charge of private certifiers, needs a note from Council.
Now it'll come forward as a motion.
Thank you. Well, based on what I've been told, I can't support the original recommendation. I can support part of it, but I certainly can't entertain the thought of supporting something which is in contradiction to the original consent.
You could move an amendment.
Okay, well, my amendment would be that I'm happy with the, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to word this, but I'm happy with the, let me go back to the...
Perhaps I could help you, that you go with the recommendation as long as the condition, whatever the number of that, for the fencing. Sorry?
Yes.
6A?
60A reverts to a hardwood fence that was in the original.
Providing the original mover would accept that amendment.
Happy to accept that.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
Through Mr.
Fine,
Chair.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson wants to point out also condition 47 is affected if this is where you go.
Page 102, isn't it? Well, 102 is an outline of it there.
47 talks about along the common boundary to 60 Byng Street, the fence is to be constructed of treated pine. You would need to also alter that particular condition to essentially say that that fence to be constructed be of a hardwood fence, because the other condition that Dave has spoken about goes to the, I guess, agreement between the two parties whereby they improve the structure by doing certain works to it. Two conditions that need to be altered.
Yeah, happy to have 47 included as well.
Yeah, is the mover and the second happy with it?
Yes.
Thank you. So is everyone clear? Councillor Munro.
You know, councillors, Mr. Mayor, what point do we dictate to people? Two neighbours have agreed on a compromise. They've gone to extra expense to make the said fence stronger, and if it's built to that construction, I'll be very happy. There's plenty of strength in the frame of the fence. I've constructed a few fences, being a farmer and paling fences myself, and I did a nice job of a paling fence, a hardwood paling fence in Mulder Street as well. But at what point do we have the right to go and sell those two people to alter their construction? Like, you know, they've asked, they've done due diligence, they've come back here for us to agonise over if it's going to last 100 years or 20 years. I think we should go with the needs and wants of the two neighbours, the developer and the neighbour. Think about their right to say, well, we want that type of fence. They've probably got a really good reason why they want that type of fence. Might be cost. I doubt it, because there's millions put into that development. I don't think it'd be cost. But it could be other reasons that they've decided on that. Could be just the look, the aesthetics, whatever it may be. But you know what? Sometimes I found over the years, impinge a little bit on people. I think we should be mindful of the two parties that want to build a specific type of fence. I know it's a heritage area, and it's wood. If it was Colorbond, I'd say probably, yeah, you're right. But let's have a little think about people's rights. And if people would like to, you know, you and me, we could be neighbours, and I might want a certain type of fence, and we agree. So why have we here debating it? Give them their fence.
Councillor McRae.
In response to Councillor Munro, and I agree, we do need to be the ones arguing for people's rights.
Are you speaking for or
speaking
not responding to
for the motion?
Yeah.
But in respect to council needs to make sure that we set conditions, or indeed when court applies specific conditions, that they're followed. So I would suggest that in this circumstance where for whatever reason someone decided they were going to switch out the fence palings for a cheaper version, which, I don't know, there's a few, for you, it's only $1 a paling, but it probably adds up, even though it seems like there's been some retrospective needs to make it stronger and keep the fence standing up. I haven't built a lot of fences, so I'm going with the recommendation and the details in the report. But I think if we allow this sort of, if you changed it, well, that's okay, because we'll make it all right later on as council. We're going to make a rod for our own back. You need to follow the conditions, or if you want to make a change, get approval first. And I think this is an example where it's a bit of a lesson to future developers, and unfortunately it is going to be more costly in this case to swap out those treated pine for the originally recommended hardwood. But it sets a precedent for council in terms of what we stand for and whether people need to follow the rules that have been set.
Councillor McRae. Councillor Whitney.
Speaking for the motion, Mr Mayor, look, I agree. Later on in our papers tonight, we have a recommendation from the staff about enforcement policies. For 17 years, I've stood in this room and seen some developers take a little bit of leave, and councillors have then said to the staff, what can we do about that? And we're basically toothless tigers. The Land and Environment Board have put down a condition, and a certifier has chosen to go outside of those conditions. Here's our chance to bring them back into reality and say that we're not happy with that, to the Land and Environment Court's decision.
Look, the motion is, because the mover and the second agree to put those two, 47 and the other one back in the table, fencing, rather than have the amendment. You're quite happy with that, Councillor Taylor? Councillor New? Everyone's for me. Okay, I will put the motion. All in favour? Against? Thank you very much. I'll ask...
Matter arising.
All right, matter, yeah. Right.
Chairman, I'd
just asked you. You can say it now, but we'll have to have it in writing, and that could come to the next council meeting. How's that?
Chairman, I want to move the motion that we ask council to resolve, formally write to the Building Professionals Board for accredited certifiers to make a complaint about the manner in which the certifier, and I'll say certifier, has issued the construction certificate. The four speakers that I saw here speaking all about issues that,
you got a second to
involved in.
Second? Yeah, you got a second, Councillor Whitney.
All issues that we're speaking about that were delivered by the certifier. That was the issue here, and that shows to me there's other issues in the chamber other than that. But I also want to go back to a little bit further. It's also something that we should take to the New South Wales LGA conference, which is on in November, to attention of all the other councils that we're not happy with the way private certifiers are implementing the rules, especially when it comes to matters of that have been through the Land and Environment Court. And Councillor Whitten is right. 17 years he said he sat in this chamber here and looking for an enforcement policy, and it's something we're going to talk about a bit later on. And I can't understand why it's taken so long to get that. That's my recommendation there, that we do get the staff to do that. I've had discussions with the staff, and I've had discussions with the objectors. No one fought more harder than myself and a couple of other councillors in this room to get the right result of this. This result that happened in Byng Street was a win for the council, no one else, and the residents of what were happening. But that's the reason why I moved that recommendation.
All in favour? Yes. Thank you. Can someone get Mr. Turner? The next item will be one which is items approved under delegated authority.
The recommendation, Mr Mayor.
That while he's coming in. Okay, second. All in favour?
Aye.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Mayor.
As well.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say, while I was waiting outside, the room next door, which is the foyer to the theatre, was a much lighter area with a lot of proud parents and a lot of young girls with their little tutus and dancing outfits, part of the Orange of Stedford. Again, it's an indication of what a great city that this is, and how successful the Eisteddfod is. We go on to general reports, and the next item is 2.2, development application 194A March Street.
Move the recommendation.
It's been moved, the recommendation, and seconded by Councillor Miletto. Any discussion? Councillor Duffy.
And I'm happy to support the recommendation. The biggest reasons are clearly written in the actual refusal. It says that the proposed boarding house is incompatible with the character of the local area. It also goes on to say that the proposed boarding houses will result in adverse impacts to the heritage settings and listed heritage items. It also goes on to say the proposed boarding house will result in adverse amenity impacts on neighbouring residential properties. And it states the reasons there, right? It's Section 4 of the 15.1b, the Environmental Planning Act, Assessment Act, Clause 30A of the State Environmental Policy, Affordable Rental Housing under 2009, and the Orange Local Environmental Plan and the Orange Development Control Plan 2004, and the Orange Development Control Plan infill guidelines, which was only come into fashion a couple of years ago, if that. But it also, we've heard here, and I'm not going to waffle on about we've heard what the issues are. They are about parking, noise, bulk, scale, setbacks, shadowing, privacy, visual effects, 2 stories, and heritage issues, and all those type of things. They're issues that are there. But I would like to read the fact, which I do agree with the developer, the emotions aren't issues when it comes to planning, and the type of people that are going to live there. I mean, good people and criminals, and that they live all over this city, and as in all other cities. So I don't think it's a little bit fair to go down that pathway. And as for the professionalism, I think this is probably one of the first times that I have actually been in this chamber in the last 4 or 5 years on this council, where I've actually seen the staff, the councillors, and the community working together and working through the actual issues. Because I came here on numerous occasions where we haven't agreed with our staff, we've disagreed with the community, and those type of things there. But this one, I think we've actually hit it. I pat the staff on the back for that one there, because they've gone to a great lengths. I'd also like to mention the fact that the Integrated Planning and Reporting Act also supports what's actually happened in this year.
Councillor Nugent, you haven't spoken yet. Sorry.
I know of. Not on this item. I just like to support a number of the comments of Councillor Duffy, actually. In terms of giving a sort of context why I moved the motion and why I agree with the recommendation, I do support the concept of appropriate and sustainable infill development. We need to make the best use of the urban land that we have. And in many cases, that requires infill development to avoid continuing urban sprawl, encroaching on agricultural land, but having to build and maintain more and more roads, and requiring everyone to drive into the CBD or wherever else they want to go within the city. So I support the concept of appropriate and sustainable infill development as long as it complies with all of the legislation. I also support the concept of affordable housing being a high priority in Orange, New South Wales and Australia, particularly for low-income and disadvantaged members of the community. And I agree with Councillor Duffy that I think some of the comments about the character of people that live in boarding houses or live in these sorts of developments were probably unfortunate, and that's certainly not why I'm supporting the recommendation. But in relation to this development, the question is it the right one in the right place? And I think the answer is no. It's the wrong development in the wrong place. My reading of the council staff report is that the council staff went to great lengths to try and negotiate with the applicant in relation to their concerns, in relation to the concerns of the community, which I think have been very eloquently expressed here tonight. But still, a lot of the issues have not been addressed. The applicant has sort of made the point that heritage is not relevant here. It's only character. But and as though it's only one thing that is wrong with this development. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not the case. In summary, the concerns relate to character, heritage and amenity impacts, yes. And as Councillor Duffy has said, it fails on a number of levels. There's been various interpretations of the affordable housing SEP and their compliance with this particular development with that state and environmental planning policy. But in terms of Orange City Council's own planning legislation framework, the report clearly says that this development is not consistent with the LEP aims A and F, that in relation to the DCP, fails to meet the test in terms of building appearance, heritage, visual bulk, street views, neighbourhood character, open space and landscaping and security. The neighbours and the people who have lodged objections to this development have talked about noise, concerns about privacy with overlooking. I know that they're also in the report and there's probably different views about what is acceptable or not. And in relation to the infill guidelines that we've heard about, it doesn't pass the assessment criteria in terms of scale and form, siting, materials, colour and detailing. So fails the test at every level and in relation to a wide range of criteria. So in short, it's just one area that, it's not one area that this development is deficient, it's in quite a number. People who live in that part of Orange have spoken and have the right to do so, and this council has the right to say no to a development that we consider to be out of character with the local area. So I urge councillors to reject the development, not because it is boarding house development or an infill development, but because of the design, bulk, scale of the development makes it completely inappropriate for the site. I think we could, imagine in terms of affordable housing, we've heard about the preponderance of 4 and 5 bedroom houses and the lack of 1 and 2 bedroom houses. You can imagine a development there with maybe a number of 1 and 2 bedroom semi-detached units of single story. And I wonder whether we'd have the same reaction if that was the proposal. So I urge councillors to accept the staff's recommendation and reject this development.
Councillor Whitten.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I rise to support the recommendation of council staff. The developer makes some very good points about planning merit. Councillors do need to make a decision on this particular development application based on planning law and the merits of that application. And the advisors that we have in this council are sitting down the front of the council, and we've been in this room many times and we've had disagreements over development applications that gentlemen sitting down the front know very well, and they're not afraid to approve DAs when they know they meet planning law, because they've done many and we've sent many off to the Land and Environment Court because of that. So in this particular, it's fair to say that their decision tonight to refuse this is one based on their expertise in their knowledge in planning law. I suppose what we've got to be mindful of is that whilst East Orange may not be a heritage precinct, the people who live there and to the people who have lived in Orange most of their lives, it is. It may not be on a piece of paper, but when you go over to that area and look at those dwellings that have been there for many years in the school, I think Mr Gander said that he's been there, went to that school when he was 5. I didn't realise it was built 300 years ago. Sorry, Councillor Gander. Sorry, Ron. I actually went to East. I'm actually an alumni of East Orange Primary as well. So, but to those locals, it is a heritage area, and to the developer and the other gentleman who spoke earlier, they made some very good points, and they need to be applauded for their spirit of what they're trying to do. They're spending money in Orange. They are spending money to service a particular community that are doing it tough. Unfortunately, this application doesn't fit in that area, and state government planning are more and more taking away the powers of local government because they believe that we judge DA applications based on emotion. Now, we're not Sydney, and are a local community, and I feel that some of that emotion needs to be listened to, because that's what makes us a community. That's what allows, we want our people to have a say. If we get enforced by state government laws, and this is all political realms, because no matter which political party is in power, they're still advised by the same bureaucrats, right? So to look at giving some of the power back to the communities about what fits in their community as a development and what doesn't. I know that's a hard one. You've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere, but you've got to be able to give your community a say and not just say, well, this is what the state government laws say and it's bad luck. Because at the end of the day, the gentleman who spoke earlier said that state governments are moving affordable housing in the realms of private enterprise. If this was a state government initiative and it was a state government housing initiative, then we wouldn't even be here talking about it. They would have just built it, or they would be just building it. So it's good that it's in this arena. We get a say about it. Our staff have looked at it based on planning law, and they've given us a recommendation of refusal, and I'll be supporting that.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I propose to support the recommendation. I think this is one of the ones that I've found a lot easier than most, because I do know that area very well. I know family has generations known the Pratt family that owned the old house there. It's a magnificent house, and I fully agree with not a heritage precinct, but it should be. Definitely should be. Around human. We've all been told, and we know about the historical value of that. I think it's particularly from the director's comment, because I mean the director's comment, as far as I was concerned, I drove over there, I had a look, and both before I'd received the report and after I'd received, and the director's report on page 11 succinctly says, according to the SEPT, however, a consent authority must not consent to a development unless it has been taken into consideration whether the design of the development is compatible to the character of the local area. That says it all. But then the developers have put forward, and they put forward a lot of money here, and I commend them on the sentiments about affordable housing. Fact of the matter, that sums it up. Many, many times we've been in this chamber over the years, and we had to refuse controversial developments, and many times we've ended up in the Land Environment Court. Fact of the matter is that we have to have very, very strong reasons. I think that any fair and reasonable person that would go over into that area and have a look would agree with the other thing, Mr. Chairman, is Councillor Whitten also hinted at this issue. I know you have to wipe the slate clean and just planning issue based on plan. That's other facts is sometimes we live in a community. You don't just live in an economy. You do have to take into consideration the effects on developments on. Boy, I'd like every development that I've had would have probably liked to have voted against here because to the neighbours and the effects that it has had on the neighbours. It does affect their life. It affects the amenity of those decisions. But I think this will have considerable effects on the neighbours, both streets, whether it be March or Autumn Street or. So I'm very comfortable with the reasoning behind this, the character of the neighbourhood over there. Unfortunate for the developers, but I'm relaxed and comfortable about this decision. Staff have They have been very thorough. We knew it was coming up, and we taken it in. I believe it's the right decision.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also speak in support of the recommendation. I think Councillor Duffy and Councillor Nugent have very well covered the guidelines, policies, plans and the acts, and Councillor Whitten and Councillor Taylor have covered the history of the area. From my perspective, and I do think we have a critical need in Orange for affordable housing and diversity of housing stock, but the key issue, and I think the Australian Housing Initiative Institute website actually says they strive to deliver housing that is elegant and high quality. We need housing diversification in Orange, and the data shows that, and I appreciate Mr King presenting some of that data, we need those affordable options to contribute to our community and our neighbourhoods. But I have lived in Sydney for 10 years, and perhaps from the perspective of those who are not or have not been residents of Orange, this development does not meet the winter solar access needs. Now in Sydney, when you've got perhaps double-digit temperatures in the middle of winter, you can still go outside and get some sunshine. But in Orange, the winter solar access, when perhaps there's a top temperature of 2 or 3 degrees, is very critical. And I think that that's something that our residents are well aware of, and it really does need to be a critical issue in terms of the recommendation from our staff and as councillors following that recommendation for refusal. I do think we need that affordable housing and we need diversity in our housing stock. But this is not the right development or the right design for this location. But I do applaud the developers who have talked about the social investment, but balancing that with the economic return is quite a challenge, and I appreciate their commitment to providing affordable housing. But in this circumstance, the winter solar access is a deal breaker for me, and I look forward to perhaps seeing a design in the future which addresses that issue.
The other speakers. Munro.
Yep, Mr. Chair, and look, you know, discussions with many residents and also the developer on this, and I've deliberated very hard on which way I will go, and I think everyone's already made their mind up. Oh, well, look, both. It's put me, listen, it's a quandary, right? Because we've, since April last year, we've listened, and I feel sorry for all the residents. I feel sorry for the anguish and the anxiety and the reason you're here. You should be home watching your TVs and having a family day or whatever, or doing your own thing. It's so boring coming to the council to see all this stuff. I feel sorry for the residents. I feel sorry for the anguish and anxiety it's caused the people of East Orange. And I feel sorry for the developer. I'd like to ask the question of council, how do we alleviate these problems in future? We have a man that's developing at Orange, he's bringing money to Orange, he's committed to spend money in Orange, and that's what everyone here wants. Somebody to money to Orange. But it's one of those things that is a double-edged sword. We've got a development that doesn't want in Maori, and I'd say the majority of the councillors don't agree with either. And got a developer that spent $10 or more or whatever investing in Orange, and if he gets hit on the head tonight, what's he do? He goes away, tells all his friends in Sydney, "I don't go to Orange, they don't give you anything, they don't allow investment." So I feel, look, I support the recommendation, but I want to get this fixed some way, and I ask council staff, how can we do that? How can we give this man that wants to spend $1 million or more in Orange, when he starts and goes to look at buying a property, some sort of lead up to say, well, yeah, you can do this or you can do that, other than going all this way down the track, and then he goes back to the drawing board and puts 3 units in there. I just really feel for people that want to invest in Orange. And I ask the question, how do we get around that? Because everyone loses here.
Just a point of order there, Mr. Chair, if I may. It's not really relevant to.
Well,
I think what you can do, Councillor Munro could ask the question of staff to come back and discuss it with us, but I don't think it's relevant to the discussion.
Now you continue, Councillor.
Look, when you go for local government, you try and go in there. You have an open view. You want to be able to serve the people that elected you, the people that didn't elect you, and also the people that want to invest and become Orange citizens. So I applaud Mr. King's contribution to Orange, and I apologise from me to Mr. King, the anguish that he must be going through, because it's money and you don't know the man's position.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
No.
I'm not going to sit here and listen to this.
Well, don't sit here, Mr. Look, I'm hearing my...
Either the council sticks to the merits of the planning rules.
Mr. Whitten, thank you. Look, I think it's very important...
Mr. Chairman.
You can do whatever you like, but I'm just saying, let me please air what I'm saying, because it comes from here and I think I'm entitled to it. I was elected with this council to talk for the people, and I'm doing exactly that.
Got your point across, Councillor Munro. Can you conclude?
I will conclude. I will go with the recommendation, only because I think it's going to be beaten anyway. I know it's going to be beaten. But I want to make that point that we have to encourage development, we have to encourage developers, and I really hope that what happens next with this development, whatever it comes up, and I'm sure Mr. King will go on with the development and make something nice out of it. Let's get it done and let's encourage investment. We shouldn't have these sorts of debates.
Councillor Miletto.
Yeah, well, that's a hard act to follow, Mr. Chair, but I'll do my best. I'm going to support the recommendation based on what everybody else has said, because, I mean, it's all been covered. But I think one thing which is clear here tonight, and Councillor Munro, with all due respect, saying people are dragged along here tonight, I don't think people are dragged here at all. I think the reason they are here is because they're concerned about what happens in Orange, and that we live in a democracy, and in a democracy people have the right to have their say, as does the developer. That purchasing that land was a choice, it was a business decision. Unfortunately for the developer, it would appear at this point in time that the recommendation may not be supported. But in saying that, I don't believe that all is lost. I mean, somebody spoke earlier and saying, yes, well, they chose Orange for a certain reason. I believe that opportunity is still there, Mr. Chair, but it's just not in that area. Yes, there is a need for low-cost accommodation, whether it's what Mr. Kings wants to continue to pursue. I think there is an opportunity there, but it's just not in that area, which has already been covered. But I think it also raises another issue. And the issue which it raises is that there's a lot of people out there who are in need of that type of accommodation, regardless of where they've come from or where these people are going. We can't stereotype all these people and say, yes, they're a certain type of person, because we don't know what their story is. But what I can tell you is that there is a lot of people who are homeless, and I know that for a fact because I heard some stories on Saturday night when I attended a winter sleep out. So I'm not going to say, well, I understand what their issues are, because I don't, because that's a private thing for them. But what I do understand is that there is a need for the housing. But the question for council and everybody here is where we're going to put it to assist these people. So I'll be looking forward to in the future having a further discussion. And I hope that the developers don't walk away from Orange, because they've shown confidence in coming in the first place. And I'm sure that we're going to entertain the thought of having them, but just not in that area.
No other speakers? If I just make a comment, and I allowed Councillor Munro to continue along the line that he was, because he was expressing some of the sympathies that I had for the developer. There was a lot of fear of the unknown tonight from the people in the audience, the nearby residents, etc. And the many years that I've been on council, we've had many applications for infill developments, and whilst this is a little bit different from just a standard single-storey home unit development, the same scenario keeps coming up all the time with people are fearful of late night parties, unemployed people living in the units and all those things that have been mentioned tonight. In virtually every case, once the units have been developed, residents have moved in, whether they are owner-occupiers or renters. We don't hear from those concerned residents again because their fears have been totally unfounded. So there's that fear of the unknown, and that has been expressed tonight. And there's been, some unfair allegations, if I might put it that way. I am going to support the recommendation tonight rather reluctantly. I have spoken to Mr. Kings on a number of occasions, and I support what he is trying to do. And I think the allegations or the fear that of the type of people that are going into those units, only time will tell. That's the problem. We can't say who are going into the units and how they are going to behave, the same as we can't predict how people are going to behave in any resident in Orange, whether it's one of the oldest houses in Orange or whether it's one of the newer ones. I have no problem generally with a modern development, and I believe this development is rather sympathetic, but it is still a brand new development. I have no problems with modern developments in amongst heritage areas, and there's not all that many examples of that around Orange, but you go down to Sydney, there is thousands of those examples. So it is unfortunate, but I would encourage Mr. Kings to come to some compromise. I would hope that, I don't know whether you're all aware that he already has 2 approved developments for boarding houses in Orange. I would hope that he fast tracks at least one of those to give us an example of the type of resident that's going to move into those boarding house units, so that we've got some experience to allay the fears of the people that have some misgivings about this type of development. It is new and something that Orange has to face. And the state government, whilst we don't agree with everything the state government forces councils to do, it is something we're going to have to face in the future. So, as I said, I would like to support, but I will reluctantly support the recommendation here tonight based on the strong report from the council and based on the concern of a lot of the residents that are here tonight representing others that couldn't be here. If there's no other speakers, I will put the motion, which is 1 for refusal, and I need a show of hands. Those against the recommendation? There's 1 against. So the recommendation is carried. Orange Local Environmental Plan Amendment 21 regarding totally local. Recommendation has been seconded by Councillor Kidd. Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put the vote. Again, a raise of hands. Unanimous. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question, if I may, of the Director? Just in part 2 of the recommendation, I'm very, very keen on heritage and heritage precincts, but I think sometimes I just can't understand the boundaries. I know this area extremely well, and I know from where we're talking about, you can't see Emmerdale House, and certainly you can't see the carriageway. And here we have to have a heritage impact statement in relation to those 2. And I would suggest that no one that's ever visited Rustic or whatever it's called there would even know that they're within cooey of Emmerdale House or the driveway.
I'll just point out, Mr Chair, through Mr Chair, that was a requirement from the Department of Planning and the Office of Environment and Heritage, and we were slightly confused as well, but we've moved on. So, good.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Show of hands again. Unanimous again. 2.4 has been withdrawn.
Mr Chair.
So we move on to 2.5.
Wait.
While we're getting our new books out,
I can clarify that, Mr Chair.
And 2.6, John.
Yep.
Sorry, item 2.4, the applicant has withdrawn the DA full stop. That was just to clarify that. Not the item, the DA is withdrawn.
So we don't need to do the procedural refusal because they've already withdrawn it.
It's gone, yep.
Actually, the council is required to consider every motion that is received at the council. So it will need to make a decision on this motion.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. So
I wish to amend the motion to simply note that the report has been received, for example, rather than refusing it.
I remove the report be noted and also noted that it's been withdrawn.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Everyone happy with that? All those in favour? Against? Carried. 2.5 has been dealt with. 2.6, development application DA 305, 168 Shirley Road. Recommendation on page 130.
Chairman, I'd like to move
Councillor Duffy.
different recommendation. And my different recommendation, if someone will second it just for a second, because I'll get a comment from the director and we'll have a bit of my recommendation is that we defer this development application pending agreement the owners of the land.
I'll second that for discussion.
It's seconded by Councillor Whitten.
Now, the reason I have concerns, my concern is that housing itself, the house itself, approval.
Access.
Now, is there any legal implications? And I just want the director to make comment on what I've just spoken about, and hopefully he'll make comment about the access as well.
Mr Chair, just to clarify and help me out here, Mr Johnson, the stages to this development, the current report recommends approval with conditions. Now, if you go with that, stage 1 can be approved without requiring easements across other people's properties. The latter stages, however, both require, as Mrs Dwyer said, easements across neighbouring land. Now, this is a valid consent. You can do it this way. Your proposal, I'm thinking, is that the matter be deferred from tonight, staff to encourage the developer to make those agreements for those later stages now, or to make adjustments to the proposal. So, for example, that easements for stormwater could go down the road and therefore not require neighbouring permission, only council's permission. That's how I'm interpreting your thing. So we could note this and we could tell the developer that's what council wants.
Just to clarify that, Councillor Melito, that's exactly what I'm looking at, because I know that it is the house itself is allowable, but we don't have any real agreement on the easements, and I don't want to see it go through unless there's an agreement there. If we can't get any agreement, I would like him to come.
So, Mr Chair, I think the motion becomes that staff go back to the developer once more to encourage the developer to get those easement agreements, then bring the matter back to council.
Councillor Melito.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll be speaking against the amendment, basically because I've had the opportunity to attend a couple of meetings, and my understanding is that the residents who are affected by number 3, lot number 3, or whatever it is, there's 3 stages, I should say stage number 3. They're very strong on the fact with regards to the consultation that they've already had, and so I don't see what benefit. There's been plenty of opportunity before tonight for the developer to make representation to the people, the landowners, and to get consent. My understanding is that they're very strong. I might be weighted here, but I don't see what benefit it's going to have to have a deferment whilst consultation takes place. Come back here at a later date because the opportunity's already been there.
Councillor Whitten.
Mr. Chairman, last time this came to council a few weeks ago, my problem was that to approve a subdivision doesn't have any access. And I still really haven't got a question or answer to that, that we are being a developer, subdivision subject to easements. They don't have any access to the subdivision. So that is a problem for me, right? So somewhere along the line, what happens when the owners of the land subject to giving access say, we're not going to give you access through our land? Then that person is then going to go to the Land and Environment Court and then pull something on, because I do know that I think and set me correct that we can, as state government planning can actually put covenants over easements and enforce them. And I asked the question, can they do the same with access to it?
Mr. Chair, if I may, through you. So what you say about access, stage 1 does not need access. The latter parts of the development as proposed, they will, I agree, they will need access. The developer...
Unless it's one of those really, like the resorts you see in Malibu where there's helicopters go.
But Mr. Chair, so the developers made some conscious decision to be happy with stages 2 and 3 not having access or easements for sewer and stormwater. So in effect, if you go with the recommendation tonight, all he'll be able to do is build 3 or 4 houses, and then it will be stymied by the neighbours until such time as they agree. Or he somehow redesigns and puts pipes somewhere else, maybe down Council's Road.
May I ask this question then?
And
are there clauses within state planning developer can leverage once he has built these homes without negotiating with council or the owners of the land?
Mr. Chair, my understanding is easement matters, happy to be corrected, Mr. Greenham, go to the Supreme Court, and they're difficult matters to get through.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll cut to the chase. I have a problem because there's too many grey areas here, right? We're about to give a permission, and thank you, Mr. Director, for explaining that to me. I do understand that this is a staged approach. I don't understand the logic. I don't understand why a developer would go to the risk of developing a subdivision and building homes on it knowing that he can't get to them. Must know something that we don't, or probably has, probably by the time he does it, the neighbours may agree to it. I don't know, but I can't make a decision on those facts, right? I can't agree to this going ahead unless I have more information about how are these subdivisions going to be accessible. I understand the easement process. That'll be negotiated. Landowners for putting in sewer and water and all those sorts of things, and telecommunications and all that sort of stuff. But that still doesn't answer my question about what mechanism is this developer going to use down the track to enforce access to those properties. And we're here to protect we've got to take the DA on merit. The developer has rights, but so do the people who live around there who own the land that he's going to be trying to use to get into the subdivision.
Right,
Sell it to him, well and good, that's their business.
Before we go any further, I need to go back to the recommendation. We failed to record a seconder for...
Mr. Chairman, I move the motion, and mine's a motion. Councillor,
his is the motion.
I didn't understand what I moved. I moved that we defer it.
No, I go back to the original recommendation. We failed to record a seconder for the...
There was no original recommendation.
He moved them. We didn't do that.
Recommendation. I stood up and moved it. Chairman.
We had a recommendation.
No, we didn't have a recommendation.
He moved a recommendation. He must have popped.
That's correct. We don't have
He moved to defer. Yeah.
We only have one motion,
Which is mine.
Okay. Any other speakers?
Look, in the case of the recommendation here, I went out and met with the area and have had a real good look at it. I understand completely what the objectors are actually saying, and I just can't see, and I agree with Councillor Whitney, I just really can't see how you can have a bit here and a bit there, and you can do this bit, but the other bits will rely on those people agreeing. I'd hate to have that sitting over my head saying, well, gee, possibly they could use that as leverage. It's yes or no, and as far as I'm concerned, the answer is no.
Okay, no further discussion. Can we have?
I think the motion is to defer the matter.
Further matter until there's an agreement between the easement and the developer. Otherwise, we come back and.
You're all happy it is a deferment
Chairman,
rather than a refusal?
I'll move an amendment of a refusal of the application because, like I said earlier, it doesn't. The motion does. It's deferring it about the easement process, but I still don't get an answer about the question of how they get access to the place. So, until such time, I'm happy to move an amendment that we refuse it. Yeah.
You prepared to go that way, Mr. Duffy? Yeah, Councillor
no,
Duffy.
I'm not because I don't.
Okay.
I want clarification from the director. I want to know if we refuse it. Is that what's the legal ramification if we refuse it? Does that?
Mr. Chair, what I would say is, if you are of a mind to refuse it, I need to hear more reasons for refusal in planning terms. Firstly, secondly, I need to come back in 2 weeks with a properly written up refusal document to protect us legally.
To give you the reason, Mr. Chairman. The reason that I'm refusing it because the subdivision has no agreement with any surrounding landowners to get access to the subdivision. As far as I'm aware, he has there is nothing in this report that suggests to me that the developer has spoken to any surrounding landholder that will give him access to his subdivision. That's why I'm refusing it, because I'm not going to approve a stage of development and building homes to something that doesn't have access, because it will come back somewhere down the track to bite us somehow, some way.
Mr. Chairman, I can't support a refusal at this stage. Because I mean the director's words were ringing in my ears that it is a legal consent. No reason why we cannot consent this. I'm going to support Councillor Duffy on this. Have the director come back. A refusal leaves us in a legally sticky situation. Councillor Duffy's motion.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? May I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor Whitten.
Through you to Councillor Duffy, he's asked for negotiations on easements. Ask him to ask the director to ask the developer, could they also negotiate access? For his. I just want to know how they're going to get in the joint.
Can I just say,
I know how they're going to get sewer and everything else there.
Point of clarification here, we know that the residents out there don't want to give access over it. So why are we going back to ask them again and asking the developer to go back and ask them again? Because the answer is no. And I don't think that's not a real difficult bit to understand, no. And that's what it is. They have said no, and they made that quite clear when we had that on-site meeting. And I've spoken with them all individually, and they've said no. Now that's but what I can't understand, how we're going back, come back with the same answer.
Mr. Chair, may I have a crack at answering that? maybe it's not about the neighbours going back. Maybe it's council making a statement to the developer that they're going nowhere and they need to maybe take a different approach.
Thank you.
Answers Councillor Whitten's comment.
Thank you.
Councillor Newton. But I'd like it in the motion, so I know, yeah.
I'd like
Get things in
support-
writing.
Councillor Whitten.
Sorry.
Speaking to the amendment or the motion?
I don't know what I'm speaking to. No. I'm speaking in support of Councillor Duffy's
May I make
motion.
it easier for you? May I make it easier for you? Mr Chairman, I'm happy to retract my seconder agrees.
Yeah, look, I'm quite
If Councillor Duffy's motion says in there that access is part of the deferral.
Through Mr Chair, I had already interpreted it, meaning easements for sewer, water, power, roads, whatever easements are involved, including
right.
access.
I take your advice on good quality.
So the motion of refusal has been withdrawn?
My seconder agrees.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so we're now talking to the recommendation.
I couldn't put
Yes,
it any better.
Just speaking in support of the recommendation. I do want to note, though, but that part of the development have access. There is access to part of the development from two different roads, from Shirley Road and Rifle Range Road. Is it? Yep. Anyway, but there is access to part of the development, so the developer could go ahead and do some of the development.
Not in this stage, but
not in this stage.
Councillor Nugent's got the floor. Come on.
Well, as far as my reading of it, they can do part of the development. Stage one. However, giving approval, while technically and legally maybe we can do that. That as council, I think from a point of view of what's right and proper and what should we do in terms of negotiating with the, I support the motion to defer with those conditions applied. So I think that's the right thing to do.
You're right. Before.
Well, look, I support Councillor Duffy's recommendation. It's going to open dialogue. People after this meeting, the developer will have a better idea on how we think. The residents also have an idea, more of a solid idea how we think, and I think it opens dialogue to go forward and get a better outcome. It's up to I suppose it's left in the developer's court to work hard to work on that dialogue, how they negotiate with their neighbours, whatever, get an outcome. And I think that's what it's all about. So that'll do.
Well, before we vote, Mr Burdak would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr Chair. To councillors, in relation to the deferral motion, can I just please note that deferring the action, consideration of this subject to the neighbours' agreement would amount to a constructive refusal potentially of the application, therefore could still be actionable. My recommendation would be to defer the matter for further consideration of the issues and report by the council staff.
Why didn't you say it like that, Councillor Duffy?
That's what he said, wasn't it, Kev?
That's what he said.
He said what?
Chair, so just
I'm happy to go down there.
Councillor Duffy said, actually.
Through Mr Chair, my interpretation was that we hadn't gone as far as to say the agreement, that I was actually going to go away and seek the developer to negotiate, hopefully not. So it was a softer motion that I was hearing in the end, that I was to go back, I was to tell the developer in strong terms council's message, ask them, go back to the drawing board on this easement issue, perhaps talk to the neighbours, sort it out before it comes back to this chamber. So, but Mr Burdak's wording is correct.
Got a nod from Mr Burdak, so no further discussion. Show of hands for the motion of deferral. Unanimous. 2.7, Development application DA 350, 47 to 49, Hill
Move the
Street.
recommendation.
Who was that?
Me.
And been moved, Councillor Kidd, seconded by Councillor Miletto. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want a comment from the Director, if I could, about the issues, the difference in the issues that were originally there to what we've come up with today.
I'm going to ask Mr. Johnson to address those.
Thank you.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
The difference between this one and the previous
Okay.
iteration.
Yeah, the main change was certainly changing the visual presentation of the development to Kite Street. The initial proposal had two single dwellings. They had garage presentation to the street. There was, I guess, adverse sort of heritage impact upon how the transitions with the Newstead development. This proposed development seeks to change the access corridor that goes through the development. It just moves slightly. There's now a central driveway. The two dwellings fronting Kite Street have been designed whereby access is needed to be provided from the internal access driveway, and there will be no, visual presentation of a garage to Kite Street because the access comes in via the internal road. And the visual presentation there has windows that look like a dwelling to the street, which is compatible with, I guess, many of the buildings that actually address the street in that little precinct. And you'll note that there are some very significant buildings on the opposite side of the road to this development. That was the main trigger, and that was the reasons why, I guess, council staff and councillors did not support the initial development. There are conditions that are included in there that deal with some further detailing that have been recommended by Council's Heritage Advisor, and they've been discussed with the developer, and there hasn't been any objections to, the conditioning of those particular matters. So, in a nutshell, that's the main change to the development.
Now, I called on Councillor Nugent earlier, but he sounded a bit like Councillor Duffy until I turned around.
Well, yeah, I was about to start speaking, and he was into it already. So, but that's okay. I really had a follow-up question to Councillor Duffy's question in relation to. I was going to ask a similar question about what are the changes. My main concerns about this development when it last time it came, I know that it's had a sort of fairly long history, and I think 4 exhibition periods. My main concerns were about the presentation to Kite Street. The potential impact in terms of the heritage streetscape, and with MENA across the road and Newstead Bowling Club, the old residence there. So, and yes, it's great that there's now a single driveway. I think that's an improvement. The fact that the garages don't present to Kite Street, that's great. The other concern that had been expressed by various people was about, I think is it the house that's nearer to Newstead, about how far forward it is in the street, and I think it's pretty much still in the same position. Although I note there's the developer talks about it being stepped back. Can you just speak to that through you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Certainly to pay homage to the Newstead Bowling Club, I guess a transitional sort of setback to new development adjoining it is preferable. And with the redesign and taking the garage out of that particular presentation to Kite Street has meant that they can flip that particular design over, whereby there is if you look at the plans there, it's on page 174. There's obviously bigger plans there, but just on the one in the report, there is that transition with a design whereby it steps back a little bit to the front. That was certainly a key critical issue that we raised with the developer right from the start. It's provided, I guess, a transitional nature there to a degree. Council's Heritage Advisor has, I guess, accepted that particular position. Could it have been better? I guess in order to make that even further better, a better arrangement would mean to ultimately potentially lose another unit. And the applicant certainly not willing to do so. And I think that the design provides that transition, or it provides a transition to pay homage to that Newstead Bowling Club and the design that they've now come up with the recommended conditions relating to the detailing, the presentation of those buildings, perhaps go to assisting that. That's probably the best way to describe that one.
Can I just ask a question, if I may?
Councillor Kidd.
In a development such as this, and we spoke about earlier tonight, can we insist it not be a private certifier that...
No, we can't.
No, you can't.
Just asking the question. Yep. I think this is a very, very important one. It's a very important part of Orange. I think, look, and a lot of compromise on behalf of the applicants. I don't think you can ever reach any of these sorts of developments, to be quite frank. But I think they have worked pretty hard to fit in there. I'm real pleased to see something actually happening on that. Longer that it's just sitting there at the moment, it's starting to go backwards, including itself. So I hope that this is a good compromise for all, and I look forward to seeing the development finished properly.
Councillor Duffy.
Well, to follow up what Councillor Kidd there said about the private certifier, and what I foreshadowed at a meeting at a motion at another day. I don't know, when does the questions close for the Office of Local Government New South Wales Conference? Because if they close by the end of this month or mid this month, I think we need to do something now to address the issue that Councillor Kidd was talking about and what I spoke about earlier about having a resolution go to the Local Government Conference to deal with these
arising
issues,
has nothing
rogue
to do
issues.
with this, I don't think.
Sorry?
You'd like to raise that as business arising after we've voted.
I'm happy to do that, especially if I have to get it in time.
Any other discussion? Councillor McRae.
Look, I think this is a really positive outcome. I recall when this came to us in December, we had quite a few speakers at the open forum regarding their concerns, and it's really pleasing to see these issues resolved, and I note that there were no speakers on this matter tonight. And I think, if I recall correctly, at the time we were talking about the impact of maybe it was a 50% consistent application or 70%, 90%, and whether we were prepared to accept those almost their developments, particularly in our close proximity to heritage areas. So I think it's really pleasing to see something that, to me, from my understanding, is it's 100% consistent with the various guidelines it needs to follow, and particularly there's a better stormwater design so we don't have people swimming in their backyard if we have a rather large rainfall, which was one of the concerns I had last time. So I'd like to congratulate all parties, particularly our council staff, for negotiating a positive outcome here for us to be able to put forward tonight.
Can I ask Councillor McRae, when are we going to get that rainfall?
Next month.
I think there's a rain dance schedule. I'll work on that.
Yeah, we should. Councillor, a nude councillor rain dance. How's that?
Is the rain
Reckon
dance
that'd
coming
work?
now?
Pretty sight.
Not a pretty sight. Look, I think this is a wonderful outcome. We all had, it was very contentious last time. We had a lot of people that were pretty upset about the original design. It's good to see the developer that's gone back to the drawing board and made a better outcome. I really agree with these types of inner city infills. I think we need more people in town, and these quality ones like this are very important to our city, and I encourage it. The quality of it seems to be really good. The developer outcome will be good, and the city will profit from it. So I'm happy.
Any other speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, raise your hands. Is unanimous. Councillor Duffy, would you like to ask that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My resolution is that the Director consider issues regarding private certifiers and present a resolution to be forwarded to Local Government Conference.
What you're going to ask the question, is there still time to do so?
There is. I assume there is one anyway.
No.
I haven't heard a no yet.
Motions are due by the 26th of August. Motions due by the 26th of August. Delegates by the 2nd of October. When you ask for director, which director?
If it's okay.
Hang on, Councillor. You've actually put that as a motion? Yes. Yes. So did you get a seconder?
Yeah.
So, Kidd,
I just want to make a statement, if I can. Private certifiers go to uni. They've done their time. I know a few certifiers, and they're very diligent. They go through all the rules, as do, and a lot of them have worked for council. I don't know why we're putting that. It's local government. They've got the right to make a living. They've got the right to a different aspect in town to do their business. And if we were to say only councils, for instance, can do certification of heritage areas, well, then that puts them out of business. It's a free market as far as I'm concerned. And somebody decides to employ a private certifier or a council certifier, well, it's their business. This is a democracy. We should be able to, as we like. That's all I've got to say about that.
It won't get through, so don't worry about it, mate.
Override reply.
Through here or through, it won't get through.
It won't get through government.
Override reply.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in closing the debate, I just want to reiterate what the resolution was about dealing with private certifiers and the issues that arise. Earlier on here tonight, we saw 4 councillors, including yourself, Councillor Munro, that spoke about issues that happened up at Byng Street. And those issues need to be addressed. I don't have a complaint about private certifiers in there. 99.9% of their integrity is probably perfect. But there are some issues that arose from up there that needed to be addressed, and we want to bring them to the attention of the Minister and anyone else that wants to listen that we're not happy about. And I'm pretty sure that every other council across the state does have concerns with them as well.
Okay, no further discussion. I will put the motion. Everyone understand what it is? Send a motion to the local government conference. All those in favour?
You don't need show hands for that.
Against? Carried. Okay, 2.8 development application DA 66 136 Aerodrome Road. Move Councillor Kidd, seconded Councillor Duffy. Any discussion? All those in favour? Against? Carried.
No, rising, Mr. Chairman. Just a question through you to the Director. Notice I fly a fair bit. We don't have any firefighting gear at the airport. Notice most other airports have their own. They buy some old used firefighting from the Air Force. Do we?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Mr. Greenham, who's in charge of the airport, to answer that one.
I'll take that on notice, but I did think we did have some sort of facility there.
I don't see it as in a firefighting unit, you know, because we have a fair bit of air movements out there now, as in RPT flights. So. Yep. So you can take it.
I understand we don't have a fire unit there, as Councillor Whitten implied or said, but we do have a brand new truck at Spring Hill that serviced the accident out there that was at the airport. In a couple of minutes of the accident, very, very astute. Those men and women that run that fire service. I think the new truck is very well equipped, $350,000 with a brand new shed and all the facilities that go along with it. So, and further to that, we've got our professional experts in Orange that can fly out there, not fly out there, but drive out there in their truck in a very short period of time to assist, in which they did in that accident. And I'm sure one day when our airport grows enough and there's enough planes there, whatever it warrants it, we can put in for that sort of service. But at the moment, I think it's very well covered. And if there is any risk, have we done a risk assessment on it? I suppose that's a question I'd like to ask Council. Has the safety certifiers had a look at the potential risks and management of our airport? And is it capable to handle accidents, which I think it has, because of the fact that it did actually get there within a few minutes, and the service was very good to that accident, that particular one. But if you want to take a question on notice, do we need Now that we're putting a bigger fuel depot there, do we need it, and should we go to state government and try and get funding for that? Ask the question.
What a good truck at Spring Hill if 55,000 litres of jet fuel goes.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
I think I've already asked that, Mr. Chairman. I think the acting general manager's already got that one.
Bloody good truck.
Through the chair, I'll take that on notice, but certainly the latest CASA came through and we passed quite well.
Happy with that? Okay, we'll move on. 2.9.
Move the recommendation.
Seconded. More fuel.
I moved it.
Kidd and Councillor Duffy. Any comments? All those in favour? Carried. 2.10, Orange Local Environmental Plan Amendment 17, TOWAC.
Done 2 fuel DAs. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Yep.
Sorry, now where were we?
Been moved and second.
Moved by Councillor Miletto, seconded by Councillor Taylor. They're moving the recommendation.
Councillor
Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, my only concern in reading the report, I think it's a fantastic concept, is the underpass an overkill? I mean, there's an underpass there for horses. So I would imagine anyone in the precinct that wants to move their horses, whether it's the Tower Park or whatever, would put them in the back of a trailer rather than run them under an underpass. And I'd imagine if the underpass is on the Northern Distributor and got a large truck going past or something, it could spook the horses more. So I think it tends to me. I mean, livestock are moved all the time, whether it's horses, whether it's sheep, whatever it may be, and there's not a requirement for underpasses. Seems to me, I wouldn't imagine an underpass would be cheap. Is that just a bit of overkill? I know it can be looked at once it comes back, but
it's not part of the recommendation. Would anyone like to comment?
Mr. Chair, sorry. This report does imply an underpass, and Mr. Green probably can answer the road safety.
And certainly through the chair, that's the direction or current route for the Southern Distributor or Southern Feeder Road. And that was taken into consideration with the traffic that would be long-term travelling on the Southern Feeder Road, not necessarily what's travelling there now. Otherwise, the proposed development would not necessarily be in keeping with the future of that road.
Fine, I just wanted to ask a question. It just seemed to be a bit...
Councillor McRae.
Horses around.
Look, I'd like to speak first to the separation of horses and the road. I actually think that the underpass would be required. I actually remember as a kid riding my horse, and I tell you what, Mum and Dad weren't going to be able to invest in a float and run me around. And I think the key to this equine precinct is providing people who want to ride their horses, and I imagine particularly young families. And the proximity, for example, of the Pony Club means it might be a 14-year-old who's actually moving her horse from her home over to the Pony Club activities, safely using separate transport pathway, underpass, overpass, whichever way it ends up being determined. But I think it's a key aspect of the safety that we have the horses and the road separate, particularly because it's probably going to be some younger kids who are going to be accessing the sites. In terms of, I have a question for the Director. One of the key issues that's been a concern is the impact on future sale opportunities and issues for other neighbouring properties who may opt in or may opt out. My understanding of the recommendation is that the exhibition period will provide that opportunity, and that step 4 is actually that Council could consider whether to exclude any specific properties from the planning proposal. So I guess I want that public confirmation that that is the case, and that neighbours aren't going to be hard done by or forced to comply, similar to our earlier conversation about the Shirley development, that there's not a requirement that they will be impacted if they so choose to opt out. Can you confirm that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it has been discussed in the report, and we've sort of recommended we wait until after exhibition to sort that issue out. It is possible, we've alluded to it, that little strip of houses along Ploughman's Lane who don't want to be part of this could be excluded from this. And to be fair to Mr. Oliver, who spoke earlier today and said we didn't get his email, one of the things I heard him say was that the Pony Club area hadn't been included. So we can also consider maybe including that when we come back off.
Can I just make a... I believe that the Pony Club area is Crown land. Part of the racetrack, it's got relevant to this. It's not privately owned, it's part of Crown land, which is part of the actual race club. The other question I'd like to ask, partially answered coming back, people don't want to be part of this. They don't have to be. Number two, question was asked me, do you have to have a horse to buy one of these blocks?
Chair, the intent...
So I had 6 llamas and 2 sheep.
If you had a motorbike, you probably wouldn't buy one.
It's an interesting question, Mr Chair, and it is something that does need to be answered. And I intend fully to explore that after the exhibition process. What needs to be done is to make houses within this precinct horse compatible. What you're talking about is the reverse, which is having houses that don't have horses. That is a key matter for us to consider.
And
if those people are excluded, what does that mean? If they're included, does that mean I can't think we can privately put on, I don't think you as council can make people, sell a house on the condition there's a nag out the back, but we are trying to design a precinct and make a precinct that is compatible with horses. It is a difficult question.
Yeah, and I'm being quite serious about it, because the reason I say that, I've been through this with my children at one stage, horse mad. Dad, people mad on the horse's dad, feeding them, watering them, following them around. The kids are riding bikes or other activities. I was just thinking, if you get rid of your horses, I'll put a few sheep in there to keep the grass down, whatever it may be. Can I? I know there's certain restrictions cannot have out at Clifton Grove, I believe. So I think there's some important questions to ask. And then when I go to sell, I own one of these blocks and then I'm going to sell, well, do I have to advertise it? Block of the house on it, only people can apply that have got a horse.
Mr Chair, I would say you would advertise that it's horse friendly. and we'll be making sure in the controls that blocks can have stables and do have driveways and stables as part of the building envelope. That's the sort of thing we need to explore.
Yeah.
Councillor
Munro. Yeah, Mr Chair, councillors. Look, I totally agree with this concept. When people are thinking about coming to the country and maybe working at a new DPI or at the new hospital, whatever they want to do in Orange, there's a lot of money to be made, not only for farmers selling horse people feed, grain, leather, whatever they buy for their horse floats manufacturing. These people that come from Western Sydney or wherever, outskirts of Canberra, if they want to come to Orange to live for a new job and a new life, look, they might want a horse. They look at that and they say, oh, wow, that's horse friendly. There's an underpass there into the racetrack, Pony Club. That'll be fantastic. We're going to buy one of those. Look, and I understand exactly what Dr. Waddell was saying, and I take on what Reg is saying over there, that you don't have to have a horse, but it's a horse area. And you want to mow your lawn with your sit-on mower, that's fine. But the next person that wants to buy that place when you decide to move on or retire or whatever, they've got the opportunity and they know all those facilities are there. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And look, if you look at Clifton Grove, one of my little hobbies or sidelines is shoeing horses. I'm a farrier. I used to shoe horses at Rose Hill when I was young. Now I'm doing a few here and there. So, look, I'm doing a lot of horses at Clifton Grove at the moment, and those people have the opportunity to ride on the tracks around Clifton Grove and whatever else. So, no, I fully support this concept. Something like this in Orange, we need more small acres in Orange. People come to town, there's very few small acres. We have to sort of try and encourage our planners, our developers to buy tracts of land and put decent little developments on it for people to have a lifestyle. Don't come from Sydney metropolitan area to live in a residential house in Orange just because it's in Orange. So there's a lot of people that are looking for that market, and we've got to provide that market for those people, and I really agree with this.
Oh, yeah, look, I think Councillor Munro has tapped into something very valuable here. I think it's probably an excellent opportunity here. When you buy a block of land, you throw in a horse. What a great opportunity to promote Orange.
Greyhounds, old thoroughbreds. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, I agree with the actual concept plan, and I agree with the recommendation, although I do agree with Councillor Taylor as regard the underpass. I can't see it's why there, especially after the director makes the comment it could be part of the Southern Feeder Road. For God's sake, Councillor, we just paid for 75% of that NDR. We don't want to be totally paying for the total Southern Feeder Road. We need some money from state and federal government for that. So I think that's something they should be there. But the Pony Club's down this bottom end of it, so I can't see them running across the paddock over there. As regards to some people who want to opt out of it, I don't have a problem with that at all. I honestly don't. But I just want to give you some examples of where people have opted out of things before and come back later on and say, oh, God, we wish we'd have been in part of that. And I'll give you an example. And some of the experienced councillors have been here in the last term. We must remember on the border of Cabon and Orange up around the Canobolas Way, there was a gentleman came and spoke to us when the lectern was over there. And he wanted a DA approved to build on it because Cabon wouldn't let him happen over there because his land was, he moved it out to come back in, and he wanted something to happen with it. He wanted a development application. Now, I know for a fact that that's one example. I know for a fact that Bruce Casey's family, when Bruce was alive, he opted to go out into Cabon. And the family thought that their property was still in Orange, and when it come to that, they thought, oh, we're going to do this. But hang on, they couldn't do a thing because it was in another area. So what I'm saying to the people that want to opt out is that this will give you another 28 days to really think about whether you do want to opt out or you don't want to opt out. Or you sorry, my muddle comes up, but it's very important that they do be given that opportunity, because if I was a landowner out there and had something there, I would really go and seek some legal advice as to, or some planning advice as to what are the real ramifications of what actually happens. I think it's important that we do have that 28 days, but I do agree with the Councillor Taylor. I don't think we should be paying for the underpass. Paying for the underpass when the state government, or we want assistance from the state and federal government to build the Southern Feeder.
Mr. Chair, could I clarify the underpass?
I'm happy to leave it in there.
Yeah, can I just clarify one point on the underpass? This implies the developers, those that play in this game, will fund that underpass. That's the proposal.
I'm quite aware of that, Mr. Director. I'm quite aware of that, but I'm talking about a Southern Feeder coming through.
He just had a chance, Mr. Director, and he took it. You know,
my mistake.
He just had an opening and he just added something.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I suppose picking up on what Councillor Kidd was saying before, these sorts of precincts, presumably, we've already heard that there's one going ahead at Blaney. These sorts of precincts obviously operate elsewhere. I'd like sort of more information about how they actually operate. So the next time this comes back before council, it'd be nice to have a little bit more detail on that in that regard, in terms of requirements, conditions of sale, etc. But my question is just in terms of timing. Councillor Duffy's talked about 28 days. Going on public exhibition, when is that occurs after the gateway determination?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Waddell. In terms of what is the time frame for the next steps with this?
So if council goes with the recommendation tonight, then package all this up, send it to the Department of Planning's gateway team. Now that gateway team might say, yes, that's fine. You can put it on public exhibition and that'll be 28 days. We'll then go through the submissions that come in and report back to you. Often what they do is they say, well, it's almost fine. We need further work before you go on public exhibition. So we'll put it to Gateway. We'll get a letter back, and so will the applicant. We might have to do further studies, then public exhibition, then back to you.
There could be some way down the.
Yeah, if we need further studies or the department asks for it, we could still be months away from public exhibition. But it's quite a thorough package, I think.
I guess just in terms of expectations of those people who may want to be excluded as to when they'll have the chance to have their say on that.
Councillor Whitten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I'm in support of the recommendation. My understanding of equine facilities is a little bit like a right to farm, right? As we urbanise out that way towards the racecourse, it just gives those people in that area who wish to have horses the right to have horses. And that's what it means. Round Rose Hill, for years I remember as a young bloke, along James Roos Drive, they used to walk all the horses, like the top horses along the road there, and then they built the underpass underneath from the stables. But as they urbanised the area, people complained about horses when they make noises of a night and day, and so they had to move, all of the top trainers had to move their stables to Warwick Farm and all that sorts of things. So my understanding is that if people want to have racehorses or ponies or whatever, that once it gets urbanised, people can't complain that they've got horses.
We've got more information coming. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. 2.11, draft enforcement policy. Move the recommendation, Councillor Kidd. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you very much.
Any comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Duffy.
Sorry. My question was, as before, is that, why has it taken so long? But, Director, have you missed anything?
That's a loaded.
Yeah, I hope that if I have missed anything, it will be picked up during public exhibition. I know people in the community are keen to see this document. Acknowledge that. It is based on 2 or 3 acts. We've been careful to make sure it's comprehensive. Look forward to submissions and perhaps, conversations with
Councillor Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy for this to go out in public exhibition and see what people think, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will be making comments, which is great. I suppose I'm just interested at this stage in how this policy is different from how we do things currently, and I suppose just to take an example of the old RMS site work that development activity that happened out there without any development consent, how might this policy change the way we dealt with that particular situation? Or, is there any difference under this policy with that sort of scenario?
Agree, Mr. Chair. I think policy, you mean the Leewood RMS site, Councillor? The Leewood RMS site.
Yeah, sorry, the Leewood.
Okay, so the Leewood RMS site, for example, illegal felling of trees and occupation was brought to the attention of staff. Letters were written. There was a dispute between the owner and the person who'd occupied it as to who should play this game with us. Second letter went. They then, I thought arrogantly, asked if they could rezone the site. We're told no. So this is our practice, which has been our practice. Get in touch with them, stop what they're doing, work with them, get it regularised. Now, we were about to issue fines when they came in, lodged a DA. They've been told they can do a planning proposal when it's all regularised. Would this policy make it any different? This policy is about formalising processes we'll go through, telling members of the public, telling developers that they are warned, these are the processes, we will follow them through. The separate issue, I think, is the leadership of councillors on how hard you want us to go. And that, what we will also seek guidance on whether you want me to write 1 warning letter or 3 before the fine book comes out. So these are the discussions I'm looking forward to, because historically we've had a practice of trying to regularise illegal works, try to all work together as a town, unless it's outrageous. Tried this collaborative approach, and some would argue earlier on Councillor Whitten called us toothless, and sure, there's an element to that. but there has been some success in the approach taken so far. So I keenly look forward to some comments from council on tone.
Paraphrasing.
I was
Wasn't
paraphrasing.
Mr Chair, if I may, look, I'd like to
Councillor Duff.
congratulate the staff on getting this document together. I think what's really important about it, and it will go out on exhibition, is that it perhaps formalises perhaps something that was informal. I think that's what this is about. It also draws a line in the sand where we can say that we've got a policy and here it is. Anyone coming in, any developer, household or whatever, these are the rules. Step over the line, what's going to happen? For that reason, I think it's very, very important. I look for what sort of comments come back.
Councillor Kidd.
Mr Chair, Council, I'd like to ask the Director or the Acting General Manager if I don't think I've got any interest conflict here, but I'd just like to bring it up in Council that I do live across the road. I've been living there since Christmas, and Mr Conran has...
Mr Chair, that's the next item.
Oh, shit, okay. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry.
Wrong house.
No further comment. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Okay.
We're used to putting our hands up tonight, so...
Now, with this next one, I'd like to ask your advice if you think I have a conflict. That's okay, I'll go out of the chamber, but I have no pecuniary or real interest. Mr Conrell's not a social friend of mine. He did bring this to me.
Perhaps, Councillor Munro, it might be preferable for you to make the disclosure in the confidential session rather than in the open session.
Yep. Okay, no worries.
Burning of vegetation.
2.12.
Sorry. No.
So, if I may help you, Councillor Munro, I think it'd be best to...
Apologise.
2.12, it'd be best to declare a non-pecuniary, non-significant.
Not easier.
If you want advice, yeah.
Yeah, stay.
Yeah.
No, leave.
Leave.
I would.
Okay, I don't care. I'll leave that up to my learned councillors to make a decision without...
Applications to burn vegetation.
I'm prepared to move a recommendation which is to allow the burning of the vegetation and in discussion with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service.
Have a seconder for Councillor Mileto, seconded.
The reason why I say that is you look at the location of these things, they are on the edge of town, and I don't think there'll be very minimal even address a few others of some other work forward as well.
Councillor Mileto.
Yeah, thank you. I support Councillor Duffy in this aspect. Basically, just as a special one-off type arrangement, and any other person who lived just out of town or whatever would be able to make application to Rural Fire Service or whatever to get a permit to do this anyway. That's my understanding of how it works. So I don't see what the situation is here. The only thing which I would ask to be taken into consideration is the weather conditions at the time that they want to do these burn-offs. So taking into consideration whether, which direction the wind and that is going. So I'm going to be some thought with regards to not doing them all at the same time, but at separate intervals depending on what the weather conditions are at the time.
Mr Chair, could I be so bold as to maybe paraphrase state what the motion now is? Or could it be that the applications to burn vegetation be approved and staff prepare approval documents that include appropriate conditions? So we will look at weather. We will look at the RFS requirements.
I'm happy to accept that, as long as they can burn them.
Well, that's implied.
With approval, subject to.
We will be conferring with the RFS on what those conditions should include, and fire and rescue.
Yeah, look, if I can just speak to that. I know that we have a policy burning off in town, but these are on the edge of town. In the case of what happens here, particularly one with the Conrans, it's very, very interesting. I remember that subdivision when it was built. All around that subdivision up there was pine trees, feral pine trees, all pushed, etc. If you went in with a chipping machine or whatever, it cost you an arm and leg in this case. If they just left them, they present a huge fire risk if something's not done with them when you get into summer. Some kids get in there playing or whatever it may be, or get spontaneous combustion or whatever. It's a huge risk, the area surrounding it. I think it should be a once-off. I think we do have a policy in there. I think we've got to be a bit careful here. Given permission, I think it should be a once-off in this case because these are substantial amounts of vegetation. It's just not a bit. It's just not a bit in the backyard. And I think with that rider in there, that they have to gain permission from RFS, which I'm sure the staff will go through and pick the right weather conditions. They'll know going to be an inversion, and that's probably the most important one we don't want. It's an inversion where smoke will stay down like that, like it was this morning. Certainly want the conditions where you know the smoke's going to go up and not head back into town or whatever. Let the RFS advise us whether it's better off to do the 3 on the one night, do 111, I don't know, but they've got the expertise in that, and I think that then this clears up that area. But we've got to make it quite clear, I think, to Wentworth Golf Club, after that's it. After that, vegetation have to do Bloomfield or whatever it may be, up at Glenroy, they have to chip them or whatever it may be. Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question of the movers of the motion then, how I can word it so as to be a one-off?
We'll always come back later on anyway with another one. So
There'll be other people who will come back. So I need guidance on.
Well, this one's been decided on merit.
I think
happy to decide on merit.
Question about the Mayor just raised Bloomfield.
Through a fire show.
Well, I'm taking the advice of the mover and seconder is that you might consider out the road if we got an application off Bloomfield.
Look, if I may, can I just answer that one? Sorry.
Point of order.
Go. Right, yeah.
I'd like to speak against his motion. The staff have recommended, I think that's the right recommendation. I don't think we want to set precedent. And if it's fine to say, oh, it's only a one-off, but then the next application comes along, this is just a one-off, where do we draw the line? So, I'm happy to stick with the original recommendation and speak against the Duffy's motion.
Councillor Whitten. Question, Mr. Chairman. Didn't we just recently have a bonfire night?
We recently had half the mountain go up. They're worried about a bit of smoke.
On the farm, we just go around all the neighbours and say we're going to burn a bit of stuff, and they all come over with the marshmallows, and we burn off some stuff.
Can I just answer this? Look, it's a very, very easy one. I had one of those bonfires. I live outside of the city limits. All I had to do was get permission, fire services, to have that fire. We have a council policy that says with town limits, you can't. That's what this is about. Okay. If you look at these 3 applications,
I just thought it was based on. I was trying to get a.
No, they're all within the 60.
They get out here in the jungle and they do burn-offs, and in Sydney, like if you've been in Sydney lately, you can't see a hand in front of you. They all worry about, you can't burn bonfires because it gives off smoke.
A minute, Councillor McCracken. I've got concerns because we're told they're rather large piles. Whether they're in the city limits or just out, they're still rather large piles. And I would be reluctant to vote for this tonight. I'd prefer to have perhaps a deferment until we can get some confirmation that we can make this a once-off, that there's not going to be any precedences. That's my concern. How can we enforce that this is a once-off? Everyone knows that no matter what happens, don't bother making an application.
I'd actually like to reinforce, Mr. Chair, that issue of we do have some precedents for burning off with the recent bonfire festival. We've also had a lot of talk about the wood bank and opportunities to contribute to it. And while we're looking at this as a case by case, concern is that it does set a precedent for, just write in and we'll change the rules. And I think it also comes back to if people are planning on ripping out trees or doing any kind of work in relation to, they're going to create a big pile of stuff, they need to have a plan of what they're going to do with it and actually plan for the financial management, whether that is chipping, whether it is taking a green waste to the tip and recovery centre and how you're going to get it there. My concern is that, like you've mentioned, we're opening the floodgates. And does that mean that there'll be repeated applications? So I would support a one-off, but I think the suggestion to defer and be able to get more information on what's a workable solution sounds very, very suitable.
You've been talking, Councillor McRae, there's a bright idea come out of this corner.
Mr Hodges, what could we do to not have any after this?
Firstly, in relation to the comment about it being a policy of council, it's actually state legislation. So council can issue approvals for burning, but our consistent approach has been not. But to address the question about the how could you make it a one-off, perhaps we could bring back a policy after discussion with Fire and Rescue and also Rural Fire Service, identifying that no burn zone. In theory or in practice, we've had that mapped out pretty well for many years, and that's where we've been the consistent approach. Once you're out inside that line, you can't burn. We've had an expansion of the city quite significantly in the last sort of 15, 16 years since we've been doing this, so we can bring back a map and identify that specifically for council to consider, if you like.
Just if I may make a comment, quite interesting. I know of 2 fires of a lot of vegetation on the edge of town that just happened to catch on fire. It must have been spontaneous combustion in the middle of winter. And that's what the danger that we have. And I don't mean small fires, but I think sometimes we have to have the rationality of what we think about. Now, take the back of Bloomfield. I was out there, as was Councillor Nugent, planting trees, dark day and so forth. At the back of Bloomfield there, I can tell you, coming into a hot, dry summer, which we're going to hit right now, we've got an inherent fire danger at the back. Because the amount of dead timber, a lot of that hawthorn, rubbish. I can tell you, Department of Health haven't got the money to go in there and do it. We haven't, as a council, got the money to do it. And I would rather see a coal burn go through there, decrease the risk of, hold it, we'll leave it there, might get some smoke, but the higher risk is if that catches on fire and moves towards Bloomfield and buildings on Bloomfield and the nursing home that's down that end. In the case of these pine trees, go up and have a look at the amount of pine. It is a high risk to the other people. Now, I'm not saying just let them burn. I'm saying that we talk with Rural Fire Service and so forth, and they will quite often say, yep, be in attendance. We will actually be there. Now, this is the interesting one. There was another big fire that started last year near me, pine trees, and the pine trees were green, shouldn't have been set on fire and everything, and the person said, you shouldn't have done that. Oh, I was not supposed to do it. And they said, well, look, if you push them up with the bulldozer and so forth, we'll come out and help you. We'll keep a look on it. So I think just a little bit of sense. In this case, let's clean up some of these things. And I'll be quite honest, I'm not quite sure the one in Carney's Drive. I'm just trying. I think I know the lot of them. But I'll put this question to you. Look, I think we set the rules, and I agree with Councillor Nugent on this. If a developer's going into an area and we know there's lots of vegetation going to be around or pushed down or whatever it may be, quite clear in our approval that's got to be chipped. Site. But we're talking about here the things that have happened. These are actually on these people. Each of those, I would say, presents a very, very high risk if they just leave it there, which they can. They could leave leave it as it is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just from what the Mayor was just questioning there about the 136 Carneys Drive stand. It's still standing at the moment, so it is some pine trees there, proposed to be knocked over as part of the future development of the site, so which is in the near future. When you're driving to the east coming from Burrendong Way, you go past those dams on the left-hand side there close to the road. Behind those is a stand of about 8 pine trees existing. The tree guy has asked whether he would have to, whether he could just knock them over and burn them or chip them. So they haven't actually come in with a pile of trees already. So that's also why I've written in the report.
Well, if I may, if I move the motion, whoever it was, 1 and 2, we approve 1 and 2 with those previous conditions we had. And number 3, this is the development. Developer to make arrangements with us or chip them or whatever it may be. It's a different thing.
That was a motion we moved, wasn't it?
So, Mr.
What have we got?
Mr. Chair, so far
You said yes for the 3, but who was moved it?
Me and you.
Me. I'd just like to, if with my seconder's permission, those conditions. And number 3 is different.
So,
Just before that, I've got one question to Mr. Any of these are approved tonight. Council, where do we stand as far as insurance is concerned?
Been provided with some advice that as long as council provides appropriate conditions for management of that, it'll become a responsibility of the people undertaking the burn.
By the way, just on that one too, God blimey, the third one there when thinking about it, where we would get in strife if we get green trees and start burning green trees, the smoke would be going for 4 months, I'll guarantee you on that. I'll burn cinder and you get all horrible smoke. Well, now for them to be dry wood and so forth, excellent, 10 years. Oh, so in this case, no, that's trees got to be chipped.
Right. Have
motion.
Motion.
Mr. Chair, the motion is that the applications of 36 Whitten Place and Wentworth Golf Club to burn vegetation be approved and staff prepare approval documents that include appropriate conditions in consultation with the relevant agencies. We'll definitely.
Everyone happy with the wording of that motion? No further comments. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? There's a question arising.
Matter arising, Mr.
Oh, sorry. Right. Right. One against. Right.
Matter arising, Mr. Chairman, and something that's concerned me for quite a while is, and we're talking about areas that might be flammable and cause problems. It goes back probably to a big lack of planning or ill planning many years ago, where we have our pleated part of the Southern Distributor, which goes from Huntley Road up to Anson Street. You look to your right, there has been some rocket scientists years ago thought it'd be a great idea to put native vegetation, i.e. eucalypts in there. Put them in there, and of course they are very fast growing trees, and probably 30 years they went in there ago, but they are extremely thick. And it made me think last year during the Canobolas bushfire, if there were cinders that came across, if that area, that they are so thick, those eucalypts there, if it came across cinders there, there's no stopping it. Of course, there's virtually no breaker between that area and Sharps Road. So what I'm asking is council in the next couple of months could at least go up and inspect the amount of debris that's up there so that at least we minimise the amount, because that really is a mechanism for a large fire, as we've seen last year or earlier this year, into the city of Orange. And of course, if that area did go up, the cinders from it would probably take half of South Orange. So I think it's something very important. They're at a stage now where we probably have no idea how much dry undergrowth is in there and bark and so forth, and leaves, old leaves from the eucalypts. If we could please inspect that, and that's where the majority of the roos trouble with up that. If you want to take anyone visiting Orange, see kangaroos, just take them down the Neville House Drive, Huntley Road, because on a Sunday afternoon there's probably 5 or 6 roos at any stage having a feed there. I love native animals, but I mean that's where they're living. That's what's causing the traffic problems too. I don't want to do anything about the roos, but at least have a look about the dry undergrowth there, because you have another big fire this season, way it's going to get into the city of Orange.
Do that. We've moved that motion. That's been passed with 1 vote against. That brings us to a conclusion of planning and development as far as the items are concerned. Councillor McRae.
Question of process. We determined the first 2 applications. Do we need to determine the third one in that it's a refusal, or is it just disappear?
Mr Chair, I took it as read that it had been excluded. Mr Burdak, is that?
I think that was the intent. I understand.
Happy with that, Councillor McRae?
Thank you very much.
We will now go into closed meeting of council. The Acting General Manager will advise the Extraordinary Planning and Development Policy Committee if any written submissions have been received relating to any item advertised for consideration by a closed meeting of Orange City Council. I extend an invitation to any member of the public present at the meeting to make a representation to the Extraordinary Planning and Development Policy Committee as to whether the meeting should be closed for a particular item. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation 2005, in the opinion of the Acting General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10A bracket 2 of the Act and should be dealt with in a confidential session of the Extraordinary Planning and Development Policy Committee, meeting closed to the press and the public.
Yes, just through you, Mr Chair, we have received a application. I'll just ask Mark Burdak to talk to that, please.
Councillors, I received an email yesterday from Mr Des Mulcahy expressing concern that the notice contained in the agenda did not provide a sufficient explanation of the way in which discussion of the matter in open session would on balance be contrary to the public interests in accordance with section 10(2)(c) of the Act. My office has reviewed this matter. The view that I have formed and have conveyed to Mr Mulcahy is that under section 10(b)(2), we have provided sufficient information as to the sections of the Act we are relying upon in order to make the matter confidential. However, under section 10(d)(2)(c), I'm satisfied that we haven't provided an adequate explanation in relation to the reasons why it cannot be dealt with in a session. I'd just like to note and thank Mr Mulcahy for raising this with us, and I've done so in an email. And it's always useful to have community members who can support the council's work. I think that's positive. So in order to address that deficiency in the notice, and it's something we'll have to do at a process level now in future, I'll now provide a reason. And in doing so, I just want to make the point that you'll appreciate that there is some challenge in explaining why a matter should be considered in confidential session in a way that does not ultimately disclose the confidential material itself. So I'm going to give it my best shot. And I note that council members themselves have the materials, so they will be in a position to judge the public interest in the matter. So the rationale is, on balance, the public interest in preserving the confidentiality of legal advice about DA legal cost awards outweighs the public interest in maintaining openness and transparency in council's decision-making on this occasion. Of course, the disclosure of this information would put the council at a competitive disadvantage in its negotiations. So I think the question now, Mr. Chair, is that whether to move the matter, move into closed session or to deal with the matter in open session following that explanation.
Question before, yes.
Just a question. By moving it out, with the same result anyhow, because being within, go out of council, we'll approve it again and it'll show.
Can I make a comment on that? So at a meeting on the 3rd of July, the council approved a new protocol in relation to the management of matters subject to legal professional privilege. The decision was, if council were so disposed, to consider matters subject to legal privilege outside of a confidential meeting, a resolution should be made to the effect of requesting a report on the effect on the council's financial and legal position before that decision was made. So really, I suppose the option is deal with it in confidential or wait for a report to the next meeting in confidential, explaining the reasons why it should perhaps be considered in confidential.
Just my comment.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult.
My comment would be is wait for the next council to have the relevant requirements closed. Because of the issues involved with the dollar signs and all those type of things. Put in jeopardy.
Can I look, it may or may not short circuit the matter, but to the extent that my view on this is of relevance, my recommendation is that the matter cannot be discussed in open session. Also, the nature of the materials of which the councillors are aware, it would have a deleterious effect on the council's position of a significant nature.
Well, with that in mind, I'll move the remaining closed.
Been moved. Closed meeting and seconded by Councillor Duffy.
I'll be leaving the rooms over non-significant peculiar interest because they'll have a relative.
Sorry.
Direct stuff, so how we can't. We've got to.
I'll move that the recommendation be that we pursue all costs on the 3 minutes.